Talagang hindi ako contented at grabe na. Say, what? Ganito ito na. Ganyan ako. Oo.
Hello. Can we have all the dignitaries, the principals, and any chief and council in the crowd to meet in the back for the opening ceremonies? Okay, anyone in the back preparing for the opening ceremonies, principals or council, can you come up and grab one of your flags there so you can carry it in? Thank you. Patricia. Give give me the thumbs up when you guys are ready. Okay, Patricia, just let me know when you guys are ready in the back. Okay, we're already in the back. We're going to have the Water Hen Juniors bringing our delegates, our dancers, and I think there's chiefs back there and some youth. So let's have the Water Hen Juniors welcome in the grand entry. Okay, next we'll move on to the flag song, Waterhead Drummers. Waterhen Lake Juniors flag song. Thank you. And the last song we're doing is the honor song. Thank you to the Waterhen Juniors. We'll get the flags up on stage and then we'll do some opening comments. Give these guys a round of applause, the beautiful dancers, that beautiful elders, and the beautiful drumming. While they're doing that, I'm just going to go through some quick housekeeping. The bathrooms are in the back. There's on this floor and the bottom floor. The muster points are outside in the front if we have to get out of the building. By the front doors where the signs are. First aid and AED locations, if there's any medical emergency, God forbid. We contact the tech people that are sitting in the back and they would know how to get that service up to us. So those are just some housekeeping.
We did all,
Yeah.
we're already.
We did the post ceremony and stuff, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
you know, that's where it starts.
Yeah.
But then he comes to his house.
Are they here?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
Are they going to
Yeah, they're going to
take
call him up there.
the Dene drummers?
One of these legend cuts.
Okay, can we have the Dene drummers come up on stage? Oh, they're gonna sit over there. Okay, they're going to sit with the Waterhen Juniors and the Dene drummers are gonna do a song for you. Round of applause. Good job, Denny Drummers. I'm going to, we'll start off having our opening remarks, but we did have our elders do our pipe ceremonies and the prayers for this morning. So we'd like to thank them for that. So we have a good day, a safe day, and enjoy our day today. Okay, first we have, I'm just going to do a little bio on our tribe, the tribal chief, Richard Ben. He's a father of two, firmly believes in culture, tradition, and community. And during this time as chief, he's worked hard to build a strong community with family, where families can grow and prosper, as well as a community where members can feel safe and have opportunities to better themselves and their families. He also believes by working together as the 9 First Nations at MLTC, we can achieve anything and everything together. Please welcome Richard Ben. You have half an hour.
So Chief Norma said I have a half an hour. So if you guys want to go sleep or bathroom break, you could do it right now, please. But first of all, I want to acknowledge our elders here today, William Ratfoot, and our other elders that lifted the pipe for us this morning, and also continue to lift the pipe for us back home in Middle Lake, not only just for our 9 nations and our people back home, but for everybody, First Nation and non-First Nation. So I want to acknowledge all the hard work they do. I see it all the time. I attended different ceremonies with them, and I want to thank them, Nanaskaman, Mercy Cho, for all the work you guys do for us. I was had some points written here. You know, I'm really happy to be here today. It's been a long time. I had a battle with sickness. I know a lot of people are kind of have to take a double look at me because I lost so much weight. I'm usually about 260 pounds, but I lost 40 pounds and I was sick. I also went through a hard time with grieving, and I was thinking to myself, I was talking with our hard worker, Patricia St. Dennis, our senior education director, does so much. Her and her staff here at MLTC did. We went over some talking points, but then I thought to myself, one of the themes is healing on our journey ahead. And I thought about myself as a leader, being 23 years old, getting into politics as a counselor, and not expecting to have high expectations at a young age, but I was the highest voted counselor when I first got in. So there was really high expectations. And going further and further into leadership, I was starting to forget about things. I was starting to forget about my family. I was starting to forget about my kids. I was starting to forget about my health. And then I look back, and those are the people that are left when anything else happens and everything goes down, is your family and your kids and your friends, and also your health. And the reason why I want to bring that with the whole healing is I've seen so many leadership. I see teachers here. I see TAs. that are here today, that a lot of times you've spent so much time thinking about those kids and making sure not disappointing them when you go to school, making sure you attend the school because they look forward to seeing you. And I remember being a child going to school and so happy to see certain teachers because they have that passion to teach what they have, that experience, that knowledge. It is huge for them. They take it home, they share it with their parents, and they continue today to do that. And that's because of all of you here from our 9 nations and other nations in Turtle Island. You know, for myself, in the last 7 months and probably saying the last 3 years, it's been tough on me. I lost family members and I didn't really take the time. I lost two of my brothers, my dad, my best friend, my relationship, because certain things, sickness, also addictions. I got tied into alcohol and I'm not afraid to admit it, but that was my coping mechanism to deal with what I was dealing with. Before it wasn't a problem because I would sweep everything under the rug. I felt like if you had to talk to somebody, you felt you're weak, but you're not weak when you talk to somebody. I know that now as a person, as a member of my community, I go to my elders. I talk to William. I talk to my uncle Sydney and my mom. They gave me muskegee. I went back to ceremony, and that's what I'm doing now to heal, to move forward. The reason why I bring this up today is you guys, the teachers here, the EAs here, the senior staff, the principals, the assistant principals, the education directors, take care of yourselves. But if you're not feeling that good, go see a doctor. I was stubborn for a long time. For 3 months, I had bronchitis and pneumonia, and I still wouldn't go to the hospital. I was stubborn. I'd walk 15 steps, I'd have to sit down to take a breather. And I didn't know what was wrong. Finally, I said, after AFN, I'll go home and I'll go see the doctor. And that's exactly what the doctor did. Gave me a puffer and antibiotics and said, stay home. If you get any worse, we're going to keep you in the hospital. And so that's what I did. And I kept on losing weight because I couldn't eat. So after I was in the hospital for a week, I came back. I thought I was going to be ready for work. And then I ended up getting influenza. So it was just one thing after another. It was hard on me. It was hard on my family. It was hard on my chiefs. And I commend my chiefs for helping me start worrying about my health. And that's what I think about the teachers here, even being a chief back home. You know, the kids aren't going to be happy and healthy if you're not happy and healthy. So you guys got to take care of yourselves. When you go home, don't be ashamed if something's bothering you, if you're going through a breakup or a loss. You know, I was talking to one of our teachers back home. She's going through a hard time. She lost a lot of family members. And she had a hard time talking to people. But don't be ashamed to talk to somebody. Talk to somebody. Tell them how you feel. You know, a lot of times you just got to let it out. That's all I kind of wanted to say was just heal, take care of your health. And you know what? Those kids are going to be happy. And for the leadership here, your people are going to be happy because you're going to be happy and healthy. So with that, take care this week, make new connections, make new friends, make new family, but don't get hickeys because we can't get rid of them right away. I might have a cold spoon and some toothpaste or something back there. I don't know what works. But with that, enjoy your time here. Don't spend all your money at the casino. I was gonna put some free plays out here for you guys, but but enjoy yourselves while you're here and take in all the sessions, you know. Laughter is medicine. So laugh, enjoy yourselves here. So with that, Nanaskaman, Mercy Joe.
Okay, thank you, Tribal Chief Richard Ben. Very inspiring words from someone that's been in leadership for quite a while. Next, I'm going to ask our Dene Vice Chief to come up. I'm just going to do a little bio here. Vice Chief Lawrence McIntyre has served English River First Nations chief. He also was a counselor back in the 80s and has 19 years of experience as a band manager. McIntyre notes that I have always worked hard in economic development and with MLTC for about 7 years in the area of business development, youth development and training. As in the vice chief position, I was approached by a chief to run and an elder. All First Nations have common struggles when it comes to an area such as housing, education, lands and resources, wellness, and our treaties. It is essential that the 9 First Nations work together if we want to accomplish great things together. Please welcome Lawrence Vice Chief McIntyre.
Oh, I got raised it a little bit. Anyways, my name is Lawrence McIntyre. It's not 19 years as a band manager, probably close to 30 years, but that's all right. Ko doho yatso se dana nawani tele. Ho angro se. Could you guys from Wollaston, Fond du Lac, and Black Lake stand up, please? Come to our conference here. Ho on. Yes, is a no tele. Anto a se no ne so twega ya se karate kadano kaha. Koto kampede marsi here size. Hasna de no bat se narin lai. No bade an kyo. No bat zin horel yaha. Don't seneko ha. Nan se kudano kane dana. No taze erelun. No to kaze danle. And o when I've been and o I don't know kane. Nak edwe nan teklo. Ay dason shionse. Zunidanal to. Ayo ate. Asi which I nailese. Nani asi nadedal liutro. And nadede kulo nan. When I've been hostelse. When I've been asi ot ate canotese. Ayo ate won marsin horo sinse. Said Zeo I'd like to thank the teachers, the very important part of our development, child development and education. Marcy Chok, thank you very much for being here. Give yourselves a great hand. I'd like to thank our elders for lifting the pipes this morning, giving us a good path, giving us a place where we could do things in a positive manner. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've gone through a lot. We've gone through teaching from the home, which is difficult, which is also challenging. And at the same time, you've come through with flying colors. So our students, our children, our grandchildren will be able to be something in the future, whether a teacher or whether a pilot or a doctor, because you're leaders. You're leaders. You're putting something forever in them. Yes, I've had health issues, but I'm not going to talk about it because I'm going to challenge it and I'm going to overcome these health challenges. And I also want to acknowledge the chiefs that are here today and the council that's here today, and also the tribal chief from STC that's here, and the FSIN chiefs that are here. Marcy Chok, you mean quite a bit for supporting us our initiatives. So it's going to be a great day. The 3 days. Have fun. And also the White Cap Casino. I heard there was a young girl that won last night. Maybe it's your turn. So have fun over there and and enjoy. And I like to say we're in Treaty 6 territory. And another thing I like to say is before I close off, my sister, my eldest sister, passed away this morning at just before 6 o'clock. So she has children that are teachers, and she has nieces that are teachers too. So I want to have a moment of silence for my sister, Mary Jane John. Thank you very much, Mercy Chok.
Marcy Cho, labata. Talagang labata din nila sunizehe nila. I had to remember his name, his real name. Next, I'm going to ask up our MLA, Jim LeMaig from the Northern Saskatchewan in our area. Jim is a proud member of the Clearwater River Dene Nation. He speaks Dene fluently. He is a retired member of the RCMP and previously served as a public manager for the First Nations and Indigenous Policing Program. Jim and his wife, Wendy, have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. He and his family enjoy spending time outdoors and looking forward to serving Northwest Saskatchewan. Please help me welcome Jim LeMaig.
Enezo no pa. Sinesa doinja no pa yatines aha sont nanda sa kwe hanwa kendo sin a nin na chado tonla. Jones had netha danedant o adel now no hayatina tsuru dant o ali ha zinont unu hi idol sisa. Kan danedan no hats a need yeso and liu like all date yeso and lila. Alla hilje hade nag kontubort in hilje da zahala. Sidok edani hati yun dani hayasti hati yi no had nane holana ki yala nana. Ayurt in a dayel tisantant u at kasi hiltsiha. Kusidok alas dane jada kontu no hayati des alzen. Alla ale delo at kanayel tila de kontu esihul silala. Rin chado tonla. Dani goda no en rekela dant usik ol yaun dant u esiha. Kuta siza no hayastihala no hayatia. Ta dani godiu no hayati beti la. Ay abanil atu banarel tiu kontu ata adalauta nestansan. No hayati beti hade nak etant itok o tsihitali betanil ni hilala. Ay aharin chow nutsersen. Had nisadok en huhtek ederilganla. No hayatied, no chahil chuhauk en its inteo. No chalini that itanihitlin, no chahil chuhauk en its inteo. Kolabonil visantuen. No hayatia than igote hatanil teno. Atna bayati ko hil chu. Had natato hijade kontu hodalatuen. Ay season on tuno hok honest how yung chado tono season set si amersid no hanastansa. Thank you this morning for I'll actually tell the story of how I ended up here. I invited myself. Yesterday, we have the provincial government hosted the Indigenous Business Gathering in the city, so I was here for that. My goodness, what an amazing gathering we had. We had 87 Indigenous-owned booths represented there. 87 Indigenous-owned businesses. And we still had a waiting list of people that wanted to come. We had delegates of 700 people, and we had a waiting list of over 200 people that wanted to come. This is the third year This is the third year that we've hosted that. And then this morning, I was speaking at the Athabasca Basin Education Training and Opportunity Summit that the Northern communities are having. And I was very humbly reminded this morning by an elder, a chair that spoke about the position that I have, the position that I hold, the authority that I come with. But then I also was caught off guard a little bit. I come from Clearwater River Dene Nation, part of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council. I sat on council for 2 years and actually sat on the Board of Education with Meadow Lake Tribal Council. I have firsthand experience at the table of what is being accomplished here today. The amount of pride that should come from this room with the work that you do. I get emotional because sometimes I'm also reminded of what we've lost. But my goodness, the people in this room, when you are in your community, when you are before your classroom, when you are molding young minds for the future, the tremendous amount of responsibility that you have. Do we get things right all the time? No. But do we get things wrong sometimes? We do. But my goodness, what we're able to accomplish together. Then I thought of something else this morning. I don't speak often of this in public, but tribal chief showed his vulnerable side. And I think as leaders and the responsibilities that we hold sometimes, I know when I say I'm with the provincial government, the first thing people see is government, but they don't see Jim LeMahieu. I very politely reminded this morning to some of the people that spoke of what I've been able to accomplish in my role as a Dene Tsuut'ina. In the legislative building in this province, I had the honor and the privilege of addressing people in Saskatchewan in my language of Dene. And then I think about everything that we've lost. Then I'm reminded about how much work is being done. We should never, ever take for granted how far we've come as Indigenous people in this province and in this country, and more importantly, within your nations. The amount of pride that should come from your community is incredible. I look on my side of government, I'm clearly the only Indigenous person on our side of government. And I think to myself and look into the crowd of the caliber of leadership here that could influence provincial government. So before we stand and say, this is what we should do, I think we should also appreciate and celebrate how much we've accomplished and what is being and how you are being represented within this government. This morning, I said to the elder, I too lived on a First Nation. I had to haul water so we could bathe and get ready for school. My mother was a janitor at our school. My dad did whatever he can to provide for us. He was a community leader. My parents were leaders, and the respect that they've gained in Northern Saskatchewan is a contribution to me being here. Why I say that is I'm Northern person. I come from your tribal council. And in order for us to accomplish what we can for the future of the same people that we represent and work for, we have to do it together. And that's exactly how I speak to our government, because we have to. We have to voice it, and we have to say, this is how it should be. Don't ever take for granted that you are not being represented within the provincial government. I have huge responsibility that I never take for granted. And I never take for granted that I stand before you because of people like you. The teachers in the room, the support staff in the room, the education leaders, the community leaders, the provincial advocacy leaders, we all speak the same language. This is what we want for our future. But we have to do it together. In order for us to do it together, sometimes we have to show it. Waterhen First Nation is going to have a teacher education program where you'll get your 4-year degree in your community. And that was with contribution by the province. Hatchet Lake First Nation is going to be the next cohort. The Dene education program on CRDN, we're in our second cohort. And there's more communities that are saying this is what we want, because we need to teach our own kids. We need to teach our kids in our language. And in order to do it, your community has to be the one to say it. And my goodness, some of us are listening and making it happen for your community. So I want to commend all your effort. I want to commend that every day you go to school and you're molding young minds of what our future is going to look like. And to the Meadow Lake Tribal Council, you should be very proud of what you're accomplishing. I see it within the young people. I see it in the communities when I visit. And I just wanted to say, sometimes we don't say thank you. And sometimes we don't speak about our successes. But my goodness, what you've able to accomplish as Meadow Lake Tribal Council education arm for our communities. I just wanted to say that it's acknowledged and that I'm thankful, and a lot of history will never repeat itself. Here is a room that is responsible for how we are going to mold the future. And I want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your conference. And my goodness, it's a moment of celebration for us. Thank you.
RC Jim. Just a little, my work with Jim has been very successful. For Buffalo River, we did get a youth center, and Jim was a big part of that. So he does lobby on behalf of our communities up north. He makes sure that our voices are heard, because he'll call me and I'll call him. I have his personal cell number if anybody wants it. But thank you so much, Jim. Next, I'm going to ask, just hang on. Métis Nation of Saskatchewan President Glenn McCollum to share his thoughts on how we could continue and progress forward healthy self-government nation rooting in Métis and First Nations culture, language, values, and communities, which here he is here. He will reflect on his personal journey as a Pride Métis citizen and the history of the Métis people and his commitment to our language, our values, our cultures, and our communities. So please help me welcome Glenn McCollum.
Good morning, everyone. And we tinus kawisami ko tita piruhtian. grand entry sa tuichang nim tago tapiste ko ano ta nagskata ko ste kio ka taksini guti from across our province titu tiatsik but Middle Lake Tribal Council. Kabido ti was the far north as to tagatsik. It was our elders kaya mahatsik anus kagiksipa ya. Tagwi miya ya. Tuichang nito ya. Tagwi mama o mam tanita ma. Tan site simiupit ama kuma kieno gitaskisno iguasu tina sa kautuhti akutse mi chat kiapit kitwas misnawak kusimno agaste dawita mo kiwik tap mo ako kiwi usita huisto the future nagtapahta ko tiet nigan tamios niyan ma kiwo inigan apsuig education oche iwit tatuski mai wasak Thank you for having me this morning. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to listen, to be able to join in the grand entry, and to be able to hear the drum. And the prayers that are said by our elders is always so important to be able to start in a good way. As we sit here, listening to the two different languages, Cree and Dene, it's such a good feeling to hear. Not very long ago, we never used to be upfront about who we are, but we have to be. Everywhere I speak, I open with my language, Michif Cree, to the Prime Minister, to the Premier, to anybody that I speak to, because it's important for them to realize and understand the challenges that we've been left, especially frontline workers, teachers. People talk about reconciliation. I called it a weasel word. Why do I call it a weasel word? Because people feel good about talking about reconciliation, but do they support the efforts that you give as teachers at the community level? Because a lot of our people have lost their language. Why was that? Residential school, generational effects of residential school, when kids were taken away from their families and be put in a foreign place where they didn't understand or feel comfortable and felt lonely and cried to be home with their moms and dads, their mushrooms and their kokums and their community. Today, that challenge is on you and on us as leaders to be able to develop programs that will address these issues. That's why I said reconciliation. If people would understand, governments would understand, to give us the capacity to be able to do the job that needs to be done in our community for our people. That has to be the key component of reconciliation, and governments to realize that when they give us, we succeed. You can see the numbers, even the Métis Nation, in regards to what we've done in the last 6 years, to be able to have over 2,000 post-secondary students going to school, which they used to fall through the cracks. And the first-time home buyers program, and I can go on and on. But the most important piece of what we do is the identity, culture, values, and language. And it has to be us. You know, I'm just capping us, and I know how to speak my language. My kids speak their language, but my grandchildren don't. My fault. I don't blame anybody else but myself in regards to not teaching my grandchildren, to take the time to be able to teach our grandchildren and our children. So it takes the parents within our communities. And the most important piece when we develop programs is to be able to be inclusive of our elders. We have our elders in front. They do the ceremonies. They lead us in the grand entry. But are we inclusive of our elders in what we do? I try as much as I can to be respectful, thoughtful, and be inclusive of our elders. When I first got in 6 years ago in Batosh, our elders used to struggle to be able to go celebrate, to be able to hear stories, music, and food, share food. They don't have to pay anymore. It doesn't matter if you're a non-Indigenous elder, Dene Elder, Cree Elder, Michif Elder, people don't pay to celebrate in Batosh, no more. And we'll continue to do that. In our government, we have, in our provincial Métis Council, we have our elders and our veterans sit at the table. When we have in-camera meetings, our elders and veterans sit at our table. At our assembly, our elders sit at the table. They guide us in regards to where we should go and how we should develop our programs. North, Central, and South, we involve our elders. So it's important to be able to have our elders, and they still speak our language, and practice our traditions. I always, when I first got in, always bring federal people to my community of Pine House, to the elders gathering, and to the harvesting camp in September. Leave them in the cabin to be able to practice some of the things that we do as Indigenous people. So they don't sit in isolation in Ottawa, in their offices, and try and figure out who are the Indigenous people, who are the Métis and First Nation. They get to see for themselves. And we've done that quite a bit. I'm trying as much as I can to be able to start doing that again. I talked to the housing people. We just had a housing conference. I want to bring him down here. Justice Minister, I want to bring him down here to be able to see for himself in regards to what we have to go through. It's a challenging thing in regards to the generational effects of residential school, in regards to drugs, alcohol, and gangs, and the list goes on. And we have to deal with it. But sometimes are not given the capacity to be able to work it out. You know, I'm proud of the chief. Ben and I are very good friends. To be able to stand up here and talk about your life, and to be able to talk about your leadership, to be able to confront the demons that you have within yourself, it's a challenging thing. My mom and dad, I grew up in a violent home. My mom and dad separated when I was only 9, 10 years old. The loneliness that goes along with it, the isolation that goes along with it, the loneliness that goes along with it, that hurts. But you have to be strong in order to be able to feel good about yourself, to be able to reconcile with yourself, and to be able to be the leader. And hopefully that our people that are working in areas like education can reconcile with themselves in regards to the dysfunction that's been created by residential school, drugs, and alcohol. That we are the ones that are going to change our communities. We're the ones that are going to change our people, and nobody else. So our elders are so important to that process. For me, when I talk about myself, I've been sexually abused, physically abused, abandoned, neglected. But there's such a thing as healing. And my wife, she's sitting back there, has a challenge in his hand to be able to deal with me. But I'm glad she never left me. We are good partners today. And it took a while to be able to understand what love means. A lot of people say, what is love? I love you. But the words that go along with love are trust, respect, feeling, caring, tolerance, understanding, and acceptance. And if we can apply those to our own selves, who are we? We can use sporadically words without that full wholesome you to be able to engage properly and to be able to communicate with your wife or your husband or your kids or your community. So it takes those 8 principles to be able to apply to yourself and to apply to our communities, and so that we can be better. And Chief, I thank you for what you said out here in front of your people. On the west side, your 9 tribal, your 9 reserves that you represent, and the chief that represent you, that backed you up and are behind you, and your community that's behind you. I'm so happy for that, and grateful for the people that could truly understand the results of what has happened to us as people. But it's up to us to be able to build strong communities and have strong leaders and the backing of our people, so that our jobs are much easier because of you and our elders and our veterans that can support us in a good way. Let's be strong and have a good meeting within the next couple of days. and try and communicate as much as you can and share information. So with that, on behalf of the Métis Nation, we support you and we'll continue to educate ourselves regards to how we can better these two nations, Métis Nation and the First Nations. Let's work hard to be able to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. I met Glenn a couple of years ago, and his perspective on being First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis is no different than we all. To him, everyone is human, and I like that about him because when he's standing in the front lines fighting for Métis, he's talking about every Indigenous person that he knows. And he's plowing the way for a lot of us as we go along and fighting for our treaties and our rights. Thank you so much, Glenn. Next, I'm going to ask, give him a round of applause. Next, we're going to ask our FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron. Chief Bobby Cameron is a member of the Witchican Lake First Nations located in Treaty 6 territory. Chief Bobby Cameron has spent majority of his life maintaining strong ties to cultural language and identity. He is an avid hunter, trapper, and fisherman. Chief Cameron advocates and understands the significance of First Nations culture, traditions, with respect to keeping close ties to traditional lands. Chief Bobby Cameron represents 74 First Nations within the province of Saskatchewan, making up over 160,000 First Nations people in total. Please help me welcome Chief Bobby Cameron.
Chief Norma, man, you're a wonderful MC this morning. Very wonderful. Atlanate salute na. Nabaho really wale. Tansen wago magantik. At siyo hipigsuan. Maganigan man to. Yanaskumten miugi sagal megwats. Egwa no kumno kiawaw. Egwa no mosumno. Kistame na ganaskumten igagi sumuan. Igagi sumustamo. Hepita ta rospoagan. Kakyo himetsetjeg. Tagotieg. Hemamopiag. First and foremost, we thank our God, our Creator, for a beautiful day today. We thank our knowledge keepers for their prayers, the pipe ceremony this morning, all our educators that are here, our leadership that are here, our drum group for the beautiful music, those healing songs. President McCollum and your wonderful words, Tribal Chief Arkin, and your son Colin, who's come a long way. Come a long way, Colin. Healing journey, finding that healing world. And our MLA, Jim Lemig. Tribal Chief Ben and your staff. Over 300 staff they have working at the MLTC. That's by far the most powerful education tribal council in Canada. Let's give those administration a round of applause. Now, really quick, I want all the women and the kokums to stand up. Ni poe, pasogo. All the women, all the kokums. Look at that. You see? Look at that. That's how powerful our women are. They run our organizations. They make us look good, just like our staff at the FSIN, within MNS and other tribal councils. Thank you for all that you do for our communities, our homes, and our children. Strength of our woman, man. The strength of our woman. I used to be an educator at Wichigan Lake for 8 years. And I want to say something to you, to each and every one of you that I still practice today. We heal people the way we treat people. We heal people the way we treat people. And those children walking in your classrooms 5 days a week, sometimes they'll trickle in at 8:30, sometimes at 7 a.m., sometimes at 10 a.m. They look forward to seeing teacher with that nice smile. Good morning, Jim. Is there anything I can help you with? No pun intended, Jim LeMay. But the teachers and the EAs, the TAs, you wouldn't believe how much that smile will make a difference in a kid's life. That act of kindness alone will change that whole day, the whole week, maybe their whole life. I grew up in South Battleford where Colton Boushie was killed from a white farmer. That's where I grew up. Little Indian kid getting beat up by white kids 5 days a week before class started and after school. Didn't want to tell my mom anything because that was part of that whole residential school intergenerational trauma. You kept that abuse inside you. So can you imagine that happening to our children? And the reason I'm going to tell this story is because of this. Going through the verbal abuse, the physical abuse, the emotional abuse in South Battleford, where racism is rampant, like you wouldn't believe. And going through school, going through the abuse until about grade 3, there was a teacher there, Mrs. Lafreniere. I'll never forget her. Just her soft heart and her kindness kept me coming back to school. And whenever I see her, she's still alive. I still acknowledge her and I tell her I love her. So to the education assistants that are here, the teachers, the way you heal your students is how you treat them. Those acts of kindness, you wouldn't believe, have such a big impact. They have such a big impact in every one of us. So I want to say that to each and every one of you, chiefs that are here. I know some of you are in putting this as part of your school curriculum, and if you're not, then we should start doing it every day. Dedicate maybe a couple classes a week even about the importance of living an alcohol and drug-free life. Starting from daycare and Head Start. Because as President McCollum said, drugs, alcohol, and violence and gangs are impacting our communities every day, 7 days a week. And some of us may not realize it, but believe it or not, there are 10-year-olds being offered crystal meth from that go to your schools as soon as they walk off the school grounds. That's what we're dealing with now. We're dealing with a deadly enemy that teachers and each and every one of you in that classroom, you can have a positive impact for those 6-7 hours a day. You can make a good difference, a positive difference in their lives by teaching them the importance of a sober life. Once we reach sobriety, and you know, friends and relatives, we may not see it in our time, but as long as we continue that positive message, the next generations, those unborn, they'll see it. They'll see the importance of living that sober life, where families are strong, where children aren't being apprehended, where we're not filling up the jail systems, the incarceration rates. Once we receive sobriety, the family structure becomes strong. Our own heart becomes strong. And those Kokums that I took a picture with over there, I want to acknowledge them because I know they lived that life. I know they've been practicing and teaching their loved ones. Don't do that anymore. Don't drink. Stop that. Those are important lessons, short but sweet, but important, valuable lessons. Everybody that's here, again, those acts of kindness, the way we heal people is the way we treat people. On behalf of the FSIN, our vice chiefs, David is here, Ali Bear, Craig McCollum, and Dutch Lara. Love you all, respect you all. Have a good day. Marcy Joe, hi, hi.
Thank you so much, Chief Bobby Cameron. Some good, powerful words and messages for our colleagues out in the audience. Lunch is ready. We have two elders that are going to do a prayer over lunch. We will do the prayer for lunch and then you guys can start grabbing your food. But we're going to continue with the opening comments. We still have 4 more people that are going to do some opening comments for the crowd. So once the prayers are done by the elders, you could start lining up and getting your plates, but please be vigilant that there are going to be speakers on the stage at the same time. So are there elders up there yet? Okay, I think we have a Denny and a Cree elder who's going to pray over our food before we can start lining up. Good. Okay, we can start lining up for your food. And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Please be vigilant that we would have some speakers up on the stage while you're lining up. Next, I'm going to call on FSIN Vice Chief David Prats. David is a strong advocate for treaty protection, enhancing inherent treaty rights. Vice Chief David Pratt is a member of the Muscopetan First Nations. Did I get that right? Okay. His parents are the late Bill Pratts and late Isabella Pratts. He is the youngest of 15 siblings. Please help me welcome Vice Chief David Pratts. Thank you.
Eat with lunch. Doing a good job.
But they're
I'm going to use my teacher's voice. Hey, pay attention. No talking. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'll be short and sweet because I know it's hard to compete with lunch. You're all weren't about eating today, but I do want to acknowledge all the speakers that spoke, Chief Cameron, as well as President McCullum, Tribal Chief Ben, Vice Chief McIntyre. Acknowledge all the chiefs that were here earlier on, Chief Jonathan, Chief Mandy, as well as Chief Francis Iron, and as well as all the council that were here today earlier. And I won't be too long this afternoon. I just want to say that thank everybody for sharing your stories today. All of the good, powerful stories. Jim, I acknowledge you today as well. And it's powerful that your story, you talked about how you're able to speak your language and to your colleagues and in the legislature. That's powerful and something that we need to see. But I also want to encourage the teachers that are here, all of you that are doing the good work with our kids. It's not easy. And I was talking to some of the principal, the teachers earlier on. You spend more time with the kids than the actual parents do. And I want to acknowledge all the teachers for the hours and hours of work that you do, because it's not just from 9 to 5. You're working after hours, you're doing extracurricular, you're doing sports, you're doing all kinds of stuff. And I want to encourage you, keep doing that good work for our kids. Don't let anything deter you. Good to see you. One person's listening out of the whole crowd over there. So I acknowledge her. You'll get a per diem. No, I'm kidding. Make sure to cut her per diem, Patty. But I want to acknowledge all the work that you do, teachers, and every day when you get up and deal with our kids and work with them and spend time with them. And it's not an easy job. You don't get enough pay as far as I'm concerned. I'm not putting the leadership under the pressure. Canada needs to sign the REA with MLTC and pay our teachers what they deserve and fund our kids properly, because they were the ones that were responsible for taking away our language. They're the reasons why a lot of us don't speak Cree or Dene. So they have a responsibility to help us get that back and get that language and get that identity and that culture back. So I acknowledge all of you today, teachers, for the good work that you're doing. Have a good conference over the next 2 days. I do have to run. We got another conference going on, Jordan's Principle. Lots of good discussions there on Jordan's Principle. I'm a former teacher myself, so I do remember the classroom. I do remember the good interactions with the students and with my fellow colleagues. So it's a lot of fun and I do miss it, but keep up the good work. Your work's not going to notice, and have a good conference the next 2 days. And Patty, to you and your staff, good work on getting it together and bringing everybody here today. Keep up the good work, all of you. Kachim Miigwech. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chief Prats, for that message. And we have, just hang on here. I have to find the bio on my phone. Next, I'm going to be introducing Tribal Chief Mark Arcan, Saskatoon Tribal Council. Mark Arcan is a member of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation located in Treaty 6 territory, but resides in Saskatoon. He has been chief for the Saskatoon Tribal Council since October 2017. He has dedicated his work to reviving residential school. Oops, keep losing my screen here. He has dedicated most his work to reversing residential school effects, to restoring culture, education, nurturing the gift of each child. I have been as STC's vice chief, as well as a labor force development, partnership management, and youth sports culture and recreation coordinator. I have a passion for coaching, mentoring youth through sports and culture. I continue to work with my community, Saskatoon as a whole. I focus on the well-being of all First Nations people. Please help me welcome Mark Arcan.
Thank you, Chief.
Just want to say Tanse and Naskamin Kakio Pitaksiniako Tada Treaty 6 territory in the city of Saskatoon. For all the people, how many people know Cree that are in line? What I said in my Cree language was the Edmonton Oilers are the best hockey team. I know you heard that. I pray for the Montreal Canadian fans, the Toronto Maple Leafs fans. You got to go blue and orange. Just want to say thank you to the elders for lifting the pipe this morning in Oskamin Kakio. I want to thank Tribal Chief Richard Ben, Vice Chief McIntyre, the staff from MLTC for putting on such a beautiful event for the people that make a difference in our children's lives. When we talk about teachers, the roles, a lot of the speakers have said this already. We're underfunded in our First Nations communities. However, the dedication of our teachers, our support staff, our principals, our directors of eds, we need to rally around supporting these initiatives for teachers because they are helping us create the next generation of lawyers, doctors, nurses, judges. And as far as I'm concerned, the next premier of Saskatchewan. Our people need to lead by example. With our teachers, you do great work inside of our classrooms with the limited funding that you receive each and every day to make a difference in a child's life. When I think about leadership, leadership is led with your heart, not with your pocketbook. Just because you don't have a title like tribal chief, like myself, we're all leaders in our families and our communities. We got to practice that leadership of creating healthy communities so we can change the system that's been negatively imposed inside of our people's lives. When I look at education, I think of the difference that it's going to make in our people. For a lot of people, I hope you know this, but in the city of Saskatoon, we're battling homelessness each and every day. We're battling that our relatives are lost through trauma, through addictions, through mental health, through abuse, through poverty, through neglect, through all of these systems that have been imposed on us through federal governments. And we all know what those systems are. However, at the Saskatoon Tribal Council, in this treaty territory of Treaty 6, we serve all 74 First Nations inside of our facility of homelessness. When we look at our situation of education, we have a young gentleman who's thanked our staff for helping him get a grade 12 so he can go on to get a better job and not live in a shelter. This is why education is so important in our First Nations communities through our teachers, through our community members. For a lot of people that are unaware, in Saskatoon, we have a homeless crisis, and it's our people that are on the street. Right now, there's a petition against our homeless shelter to shut us down. So we have another 106 of our people on the street of Saskatoon with no home, no food in their belly, no opportunities to have a better life or a quality of life. In our culture, I asked your tribal chief, Richard Ben, for his approval, for his tribal council, to see if we could talk about this and see if we can gather support from this room on a petition to support the work that the Saskatoon Tribal Council is doing for our people in homelessness, as all of us do in education, to make a difference in somebody's life, to help them. Tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, we're having a walk right outside of these doors, right up from City Hall all the way up down to 22nd to our shelter, to show this city, to show this province, and to show all the haters that don't support the work of the Saskatoon Tribal Council and homelessness that's making a difference in our people's lives. We call upon everyone in this room to come out and support and come and help our relatives, our family members. They're missing out on their culture, their language, their identity because of these negative systems. So what I have in front of me here today is some stats about what we do. Since we've moved to this Fairhaven location in the west side, we've housed 60 plus families, not just from the Saskatoon Tribal Council, from all the First Nations across the province, helping children and families. For kids that are in our shelter, we take them to school each and every day so they can have a quality of education. Something that other shelters don't do for our people. We've supported 105 families in this city from all of our First Nations. And we know that every First Nation chief and council in this room, tribal councils, you don't get money for urban people. The only people that fund us is the province of Saskatchewan. $4.2 million to help our people. 3 million of that 4.2 goes to us creating jobs for our people, to stay in our city, to stay in our province, and to give back to the economy. We feed our homeless people 3 meals a day. We give them shelter, showers, etc. And I'll be honest with all the people here. I was asked to do a presentation to the MLTC chiefs and councils. And we told them what we were doing. And we showed them the stats of how we support MLTC and the First Nations. And out of the graciousness of Tribal Chief and the Chiefs and the Vice Chief McIntyre, Vice Chief DeRocher, they offered a generation of support by donating $10,000 to help our shelter. We didn't go there to ask for money. We didn't go there to ask for anything. We just reported on how we're helping our people. That's the first time a tribal council has ever stepped up to help the Saskatoon Tribal Council help your people. And I think they deserve a round of applause. That's leadership. We get zero funding from the federal government to help our children and our families in this type of situation. I don't make this statement as a political opportunity. I make this statement because we need to help our people that need help. And I congratulate all the teachers and everything on the work that you do every day with the limited funding that you get. So when we talk about support, there's a group of people that live in that neighborhood and they treat myself, our tribal council, our people with racism every day because they don't want them in that neighborhood. And I met with the STC elders this morning from our 7 First Nations. And I said, this is our land. This land belongs to each and every one of us. We all own this land to be dictated by colonizers. And this is why our people are homeless through addictions, through negative systems. And I thank the speakers that talked about this. It's real. We have to stand up. We have to be the voice for our people, not just me, but all of us, to stand together united and help our people. So what we're doing at the Saskatoon Tribal Council, they're creating a petition to shut us down. They don't want to see Indigenous led for Indigenous people. But inside of our First Nations, that's what we have. We have Indigenous teachers, non-Indigenous teachers working to make a difference in our people's lives. And we got to continue that process because we know what's best for our people. And we got to continue to fight and keep getting the funding to increase a quality of life for our people. So with that, we're going to ask each and every one of you if you're willing to put your name to a petition of support to keep funding this homeless shelter to help our people. Let us know we're here. Tribal Chief Richard Ben, I hope you can support this by asking your members and your staff and everybody else to endorse this because we're here to help everybody. So with that, Nanaskamen, thank you very much. Hi, have a great few days.
Let's grab that thing.
Yep.
Hello, everybody. Again, the ones that are lined up right now, I'm in strong support as the Middle Lake Tribal Council and also our vice chiefs to support this, saving of the homeless shelter. For myself, it's very personal. My late oldest brother passed away about 8 years ago, and he had to get dialysis here in Saskatoon 4 times a week. Had to travel back and forth from Saskatoon to Loon Lake that many times. That wasn't his life. So he was homeless in Saskatoon, and he would use these resources here in Saskatoon. You know for a fact, a lot of our people, a lot of our family, our relatives here have relatives and family here on the streets. And a lot of times they have a lot of pride. They don't want to go back and ask for money or for a room or some help. So they reach out to organizations like STC and their homeless shelter here. So with that, I really encourage all the people that are here right now, especially from Middle Lake Tribal Council. I know we have problems in Middle Lake. We still have a lot of our members staying there, and we're doing the best we can over there. So with that, I'm going to sign for myself. Thank you, Tribal Chief.
Thank you, Tribal Chief Arkan. He's been fighting for this homeless shelter for years and he's doing it on his own. There's no support from the federal government, and we have a lot of our people that are in there. So it would be nice if anyone can make time to sign his petition. And then reminder, he's having a march tomorrow, starting at City Hall, all the way down to the shelter on 22nd, to support his need to keep this homeless shelter open for our people. So next we have a representative coming up from, just hang on, I have to find the bio here. She is the FSI and Executive Education Director. Dolores Nutmaker works as an Executive Director, Education and Training Secretariat for the Saskatchewan Sovereign Indigenous Nations. And she works with an estimated 67 employees as the part of the learning development team within the Human Resource Development for Management level in Director. Dolores is currently based in Saskatoon. Please help me welcome Dolores Nutmaker.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Nanas ko nista mina kagwitam ko yan absis nista kabibiks ko yan. Dolores Netmaker niyan siga so niga mastay CPU tinia. And it's been really good to listen to our leaders here this morning. And I'm always reminded of what Murray Sinclair said. And I quote this many times in our provincial meetings, national meetings, but it's also good to say it here that he said, in order for there to be change, it must begin with leadership. And I had my notes kind of just set aside here a little bit, just listening in. And I wanted to say thank you to Tribal Chief Ben again for just kind of setting the tone of his opening remarks. And one of the things that I wrote down into my notes was getting to the roots. And I went and Googled that because I knew what I was talking about or thinking as I was writing it, as I was thinking this. But it says getting to the roots is to understand the cause of something, to see or do something about the main cause of a problem. And a couple of weeks ago, I attended one of the nations and did some work with some young people. It's not something that I was doing under FSIN, but just as Dolores Netmaker, and took a group of people to go in love in on some youth and some children. And I remember sitting down with a couple of the young boys. We were having a meal. And these two boys, I was getting to know them, and there was one a little bit more rowdier than the other, but sitting with these two boys. And I remember the one younger boy said to me, he said, Dolores, he said, this guy right here, he says, he's really mean to me. And he says, he bullies me, he said. And that young man, that little boy, younger, he's a little bit older, he said, yeah, but he says, you're so annoying, he said. You're so annoying. And I said to the boy, I said, but that's no reason to bully or to be mean to someone. And so I said, are you guys related? And the older boy said, yeah, we're cousins. And I said, oh, okay. And so he says, yeah, he lives with us. And so the young boy, I said, oh, why is that? Well, he says, well, Dolores, he's in care, foster care. And so I said to the other boy, I said, so where's your parents? And before he could even answer, the older boy said and responded to me. He said, Dolores, his mom and dad are drug addicts. They are alcoholics. And then I stopped and I looked at the older boy and I said, you know what? I said, so even more so, I said, I want to ask you a question. Is that his fault? Is that his fault that his parents are into drugs? And he said, no, it's not. And I said, you know what? I want to tell you something. I said to him, and I said, I remember my dad passed away when I was about 4 years old. My mom and dad had 6 children at that time. And I remember the dive that my mom took after my dad passed away. She got into alcohol really quick, and as she was going into her alcoholism, I remember her leaving us with cousins. And I said to him, I said, I remember there was 6 of us that were dropped off at a house in a relative's home. And I remember how they treated us. I said there were times that they would go and have the meal was ready, they would go and eat. And after they were done, then our family, my siblings, were allowed to go to the table and eat. But there were times that there wasn't even enough food. And so there were times, I said to this young boy, I said, there were times I didn't even get to eat because I let my younger siblings eat before I did. And so I said, I know how that feels. I said, I know how it feels to be treated, that way. And I said to him, I said, you don't need to be treating him like that. And though that younger guy walked away, the little boy walked away. And then he said to me, he said, Dolores, I said to him, sorry, I said, you know what? I said, what you just finished explaining to me, he said, I said, that comes from somewhere. He goes, what do you mean? I said, the way you feel, he says, because he had just finished telling me, he says, Dolores, I really don't care what happens to people. I don't care if they get hurt. He said, the only one that I worry about is my mom. He said, if my dad does or says anything to her, I'm going to defend my mom. And so I said, that's what I'm talking about. Said that comes from somewhere. And then he stopped and he says, you want to know where it comes from? He said, how would you like it? He said, if you were sitting in a back seat as a little boy all your life, watching your mom and dad fight, and we was just going on about how he saw that all his life. He says, but now I'm older and now I get to be able to speak up. I get to be able to defend. But he says, the only one that I worry about is my mom. And, as we were sitting there and talking about it, I started to think about the roots. When we were dealing with our children, and so when I was listening to our leaders today, to come to that place of acknowledgement of where they're at, it gave me even more hope for our nations. Because as there's a saying that says that as the leaders go, the people follow. And I think as we as leaders in our own communities today, as we begin to take a stop and take a good look at ourselves, take a good reflection of who we are. And when I saw that today with our leaders, I think about, we're heading in the right direction. When we stopped to look at ourselves and we talked about healing, for me, it was getting to the roots. And our leadership spoke into that today. And so I am just feeling really hopeful, as we go and do the work in our classrooms and dealing with these little boys like I did, and just sitting down, and they just really need to know that you care. And so to the staff and the teachers that are here, I want you to know and be reminded, as our leaders have said today, the impact and the roles that you play in those classrooms. Boy, I hope you heard it loud and clear, the impact that you are making. And I just thank you for, thank Patricia and the team for coming and allowing me to come and say a few words. The work is great at FSIN. I've been in education for about 30 years, and the last 6 years of those 30 have been at FSIN. And I know that every single one of you, that the work that you do today, I sometimes, coming into FSIN, it's been a real learning curve. But I look back at the years of experience and different things that I've gone through and experienced, that to bring me to those tables and to be able to speak on some of the challenges and the issues that our nations and our children and our youth are facing today. So I'm encouraged today, and I was thinking about a couple of words that I just wanted to say. There's a word that in Cree that says to not ever forget. Gawi gats go once kasik, and to not ever forget where you came from, and to remember where you are today, that you also have a story. And but also the other one is biatig kuespemuti. That means walk very carefully in the work that you do. And as some of the elders or our leaders talked about, to work well together. And the last one is to not ever give up in the work that we're doing. And I was sitting there, and I'm just so encouraged by all the people that came up and spoke before me. Our leaders are leading the way, and we need to follow. And so thank you again to Tribal Chief Richard Ben and the MLTC Tribal Council for the great work that you're doing. Igose nanaskum tanaw kakyo.
Good afternoon. You will be dealing with me for the rest of the afternoon. Our chief from BRDN, Chief Norma Catarat, has a meeting. So we are sharing the mistress of ceremony duties. But it's me. I get to introduce myself. But before I do that, can I please have the superintendents, Liz Reed and Lisa Chatelain, to come and stand with me? And then also all the rest of my staff, please come in the front here with me, please. Pimpata, that means run. Thank you very much. We are a beautiful team, aren't we? I just want to give everyone a round of applause. We are dressed the same because I wanted to make sure that you would see a couple things, that you would see that we are full of unity, that you would see that even though some of these dresses are made a little bit differently, we think differently, but we're all here for the same reason. So anyway, that's just kind of that, but I forgot I better introduce myself. And I try to do this even though I'm not trying. Cumberland House is in the house, so don't judge my Cree. It's a little bit of plains and it's a little bit of swampy, okay? Dan si Patricia St. Dennis Sigason, Kaministigu Manaigos Kak Uchinina. Nigawi Egote Uchit, away Egwa Maga, Kaptigana Awigian, Muskegna now Isquel Nina, Uskinaganino, Treaty Nian Aski Uchi. Hello, my name is Patricia St. Dennis. I'm from Cumberland House, Cree Nation. That's where my mom is from. I'm also a really deadly, strong, swampy woman from Treaty 5 territory, right in the Delta. And before I keep on talking, I want to make sure that these two powerful women that are beside me, these Isquels, these Mamau Tau Isquels, have time to introduce themselves as well.
Danse Lisa Chatelaine Nasika Sun Sigip Sagagan Utsinya. I'm really happy that everybody's here. I thank you for being here today. And yeah. Sorry.
I'll have to tiptoe. Well, I'm going to give this a shot. Liz Reed Houche. So anybody who's Dene, I hope I said it right. I am from English River. I've been with Meadow Lake Tribal Council for 9 years, and it's wonderful to see everybody here today. So I hope the next 2.5 days are full of fun, friendship, learning, meeting new friends and old ones. So have a wonderful day.
I know the staff here that this education team is starving. I know you are. So I'm not going to be too long, but I thank every single one of you for all of the hard work, for all of those little details, for all those huge tasks to make what a full circle conference will be for you for the next 2.5 days. It's lighting the fire. We want you to live, laugh, and love one another while you're here. So many important messages were shared this morning. I believe that's the Creator's work. This day was already written. The men and the women that were up here today already knew what they were going to say. And that's so powerful. So I ask you to open up your hearts. We will, and that's probably about the end of my speech because my staff want to go eat. So thank you so very much, staff. These two ladies are going to probably have a talk with me later because all I asked for them was to come up and not speak, eh? Or they didn't think they were going to speak. So now they're going to be mad at me. So back me up, okay? You know, if you see me and they're looking at me, tell them, leave her alone, okay? Thank you for near and far, for our other communities that have come from the south, have come up central to our land, and then also our north and our very north and all of our 9 Meadow Lake First Nations. I thank you for all of the ceremonies. I thank you for all of the prayers. I thank everybody for being here today, our leadership. And yeah, we all lift you up and we love you very much from the top of our heads, Hillary, down to the bottoms of our feet, side sideways and then also vertically. Have yourselves a great day. We will be starting at 1:00 because we have a dynamic man that is here. Dr. Gordon Martell is in the house. Thank you very much. 1:00 we'll be starting again.
Just. All right, you guys, gonna be on a little 10-minute break here. As you guys can see in the schedule, we do have a keynote address, Dr. Gordon Mattel coming up here at 1 to 2:15. And then we're gonna end the live there and then get a couple lives going for the Dene Syllabics with Gina McIntyre and the Cree Syllabics with Simon Bird. So that's what's happening today. It'd be nice if we could get an interview here while we're waiting, but when you are live, people do get shy. Shy. The camera down there. So my name is Nathan Arias here from IOPS.ca, powering Indigenous success. Brought here to help live stream the Full Circle 2024 conference. So looking forward to it as well. 3 days of awesomeness and a lot of good speakers, a lot of things to learn here. A lot of people here from up north and around here too as well. This conference is growing. It's obviously my second year. Pretty privileged right now. I have my daughter here helping me learning the ropes. She's playing with the camera. And there she is right here. So yeah, you guys, we are live here right now at TCU Place in Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. Right behind me, everyone is eating. I don't know whose feet she's showing, but yeah, so usually when I'm at these things, sometimes they want me to live stream and not do anything else. But sometimes there is downtime and we don't want to kill the live because then you restart. It's kind of just better to keep it going. So hopefully
While people are at the tables and lining up for those last little people there, we have vendors down in Centennial D. We have Waddell Technologies. We have Ramses, Wintergreen Learning Material, Jer Bear Books, Aboriginal Skilled Worker Association, Design Smart Security, the University of Saskatchewan, Johnson Shoyama Graduate School of Public Policy, and the Sask Health Quality Council. Indigenous vendors, Beaded Blends, Willie Gervais, Janvier, or what? YRL Creations and Awasasuck Impressions. Sylvia Gopher, 7 Generation Designs, Postal Free, Powwow Times, Scott Lobacon Art, Spring Sweetgrass Woman, Louise Bear, My Heart, Your Hands, Dora DeRocher, Cataract Creations. We have Moosomin First Nation, the Education Council, Sage Bear Wellness Products, Maverick Furs and Leather Tannery, CRDN students, along with their teacher, Brian Morgan, Jordan Klein, AJ Felix, Terry Beads, Johnny Marslin, Okima, Soto First Nation, Talking Stick will be here Friday only. And the University of Saskatchewan, the Career Services, Thursday only. And then we have NEPC. With the exception of NEPC being as you're going on down into Gallery A, B, C, and D, that's where she is set up as a vendor. So we have a lot of wonderful and beautiful things for you to look at and to purchase and to support our small Indigenous businesses. I also would like to inform you that part of our door prizes we are going to be adding. So our door prizes is to the left of me, and you'll see there what we have as giveaways. How do you get in to the giveaway for the door prizes? You will get automatic entry into once you attend a session, and then you fill out a feedback. There are QR codes that will be right out the session doors for you to fill out quickly. It does not take long. We are trying our hardest to be paperless as possible, and technology is given, us the ability to do that. Questions were given to me to say, like, what about our elders that don't have an email, that don't have a phone? That help them. If they're close to you, let them use their phone or help them bring it up. And then what you can do for an email is elders@mltc.ca. And I believe there'll be a place there for them to put their name so that their name will go into the draw. Is that how I understand it? If I don't understand that way, please make sure you correct me so I can tell the audience. Also, we have some few housekeeping things. On the west side of the TCU place is the only place where you can have a pita. You can't smoke right there. There's signs there that there's this big ventilation system and it sucks all the smoke in, and then it comes in and it spreads it all over inside this building. And then they even have another sign to say you're going to go to jail. Okay, so I don't want anybody going to jail. MLTC is not bailing anybody out. Okay, so you got to go to the west side of the building. The west side, it's right there, right by YWCA or the YMCA. That's where you go smoke. They even got, like places for you to put the butt. Okay, so that's where you go smoke. The front of the TCU place is the only entrance into this building, just so you know. Also, we have a hashtag. So for Instagram and for Facebook, for TikTok, just that social media presence, let's make sure that we tell everybody what we're doing, where we are. And our hashtag is hashtag MLTC FCC 2024. Okay. Hashtag MLTC FCC 2024. I hope everybody enjoyed their swag that they got. Just want to let you know, those pair of socks, you have to put them on the right way. Okay, so anybody that just doesn't even pay attention and just puts them on, it's gonna, you'll wreck it. So put your socks on right, because when you put your 2 feet together, they make a heart. So there's a heart here on the left, heart on the right, put together, and it makes a heart. I just love those socks. But you can't make that heart if you put them on the wrong foot. The spruce gum ointment, which was made by spruce gum, beeswax, essential oils, and a whole lot of muskegee. It's medicine. You can put it on, like, let's say you got a cut on your finger. It's for that. You could use it as chapstick if you like. It's there for you. Okay. It was made with lots of love. If you have not already, Jackie Albert over in the Blair Nelson room, which is straight down this hallway, she is a healer. Nikki Standing Horn is in Gallery Suite 2. So when you go down to the galleries and you see gallery A, B, C, and D, and you're walking down that ramp, you go left, and basically the building kind of goes into like a little corner. She's there in her room there. We have sign-up sheets. I'm guessing that they're probably already signed up already, that their day is already booked. Now, Brett, I'm going to tell you this. This is like hint, hint. Every morning, one of our staff is going to put a brand new sheet up. So line up there 5 o'clock in the morning to get your healing done and put your name up. Okay, because it's going to go really, really fast. The doors don't open at 5. I'm just saying that if you want to see a healer, you got to get down there as soon as you get here and just hope that there is a spot for you. And don't forget the time, because those ladies are on it. Okay, they want to make sure that they see all the people that they are meant to see. Okay, let's see what else. The QR codes, we have these little toppers. One side you can see the agenda, and the other side you can see all the information, like the brochures of the wonderful session, of our wonderful keynotes. And so that's there. All you have to do is open up your phone where you take a picture and just hover it over the QR code, and it's going to come up. And I believe you just click it, and then you're going to see everything, which is so, so deadly. Like I said, we're trying to be as paperless as possible. So that's for you. But I'd like to say those toppers, they're not for you to take home. So Celia, don't take that topper home and take it up to Cumberland and put it on your desk. Okay? Don't. I'm just kidding. Painting session with Laird Goulet. Very important. If you're going to go paint with Laird Goulet, it is a 2-hour commitment. So from start to finish, when you walking out of his session will be at 4:45. Okay. Please don't forget, at the end of the day, we have the round dance, bringing everybody together. Let's hold some hands and make sure that we have, that's how we heal, right? Is with people and holding hands and to music. I would like to, it is 1 o'clock. So I would like to go straight into spending some time with you talking about Dr. Gordon Martel. You and I are going to spend some time with him, and I hope that you walk away how I walked away with knowing him and getting to know him the first time. I have such great admiration and respect for Dr. Gordon Martel. What maybe he doesn't know, but a lot of people know in this room, is that I said that I want to marry Dr. Gordon Martel's brain. The brain that he has, how he thinks and how he talks about Indigenous education, about connection to the land, about his home in Waterhen is unbelievable. He came into my life when I was in a transformation for learning. And what a blessing you have been. That's what I want to say personally about you. I have the 40-year-old eyes, so I have to put glasses on in order to see the print here. Dr. Gordon Martel is a member of Witchican Lake Cree First Nation and Treaty 6 territory. He is a proud alumnus of the Indian Teacher Education Program and holds a master's and a PhD from the University of Saskatchewan. He has over 30 years experience in First Nations and provincial education, where he has served in a variety of leadership capacities, including as a superintendent of education for over 20 years. He has served on numerous provincial and federal committees addressing Indigenous student and family participation and outcomes, and Indigenous education leadership and governance. Gordon has received numerous awards for his work, his leadership, and unwavering service. Some of these include the Saskatchewan Centennial Leadership Award, the University of Saskatchewan Alumni Excellence in Aboriginal Initiatives Award, Inspires Guiding the Journey Indigenous Educator Award, and the City of Saskatoon Distinguished Community Service Award. Gordon is an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Administration at the University of Saskatchewan, where he teaches in the area of leadership, organizational theory, and learning improvement. In addition, Gordon serves as the chair of the College of Education Opahotan Committee and as the director of the Saskatchewan Principals Short Course. His research agenda focuses on First Nations educational leadership, leadership networks, and First Nations school governance. Recently, Gordon has been advocating for and advising communities in the development of First Nations education systems outside of the work he spends on the land and sharpening his skills as an amateur photographer. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Gordon Martel. Please let's give him a round of applause.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That is a ridiculous introduction. Hard to live up to. And I'm just a big as fan as Patricia as maybe she is of my brain. I'm not sure, but Kitatam Skatnawao Kakio, Gord Martel Need Sigason, Sigab Sigaigan Ochinia from Waterhen Lake First Nation. And what a pleasure to be here. I cannot tell you how proud I am of every little aspect of Middle Lake Tribal Council. You know, it was hard leaving the parking lot, though, just because of all the big trucks there. I knew there was something MLTC going on. I've never seen so many shiny 3/4 tons ever. Beautiful vehicles, and my little Toyota, I just paled in comparison. I knew there's true Northerners in the room. But ridiculous, like every beautiful person is in this room. And, you know, I've had a long and winding career. And so it's amazing just to come to a gathering where people are talking about children, talking about communities, talking about learning, talking about healing. And so this is the place to be today. I want to start by recognizing that the lands we stand on, or that this building stands on, it's our birthright, it's our inheritance, it's our gift, it's our healing, and it's the source of our knowledges that inhere in the land, you know. And we heal from the land, we know that. And, you know, I think we're getting smarter about how we engage with the land when we're with children and youth, and learning from the land and learning on the land. So it's important, I think, to recognize the original caretakers of this land and the current stewards of the land. And given that most of you work or live in the north, you have a special responsibility, because how the world treats the earth as a disposable commodity, the people that are closest to the land feel the effects first. And so, you know, your stewardship and your insights into how we sustain the land and everything on the land is vital and so important. I also want to thank, I'm really proud of MLTC. You know, Chief Ben, Vice Chiefs Derosher, McIntyre, Gordon Iron, Patricia and her team with Liz and Lisa. You know, you've got really strong leadership in the Tribal Council. And as Chief Cameron identified, the largest Tribal Council staff in the province. So there's really good things happening here. So what do you want to talk about? I guess we're here to talk about leadership and learning. And, you know, what do I do day to day? Like, I teach, right? And I teach at the university. I've had a long career in publicly funded education and band controlled education. I was a superintendent for 20 years. But
I'm in a place now where, I've gathered some knowledge and some experience along the way, but it's not my own. I'm there to kind of reference what's going on in the communities, reference what we've learned along the way as people that have grown from the 1972 call for Indian control of Indian education today, where we're actually in control. And, that we still have work to do in terms of that governance responsibility, but we're moving in the right direction. And it's because of the good work of people like you. So what I'm up to is I get to, get this, I get to read for a living, write, teach, research, and work with communities. And I work with a lot of communities. I have for about 25 years worked with communities across the country in terms of developing governance models, leadership models, and improvement models. And so, one of those things we don't talk about enough, I think, at the macro level, at the large level, and that's improvement. And, I attest that every educator should be obsessed with improvement, obsessed with it, right? And improvement gets a little bit of a bad rap sometimes because we attribute it to a lot of the things that we learned about education and about schools that were contrary to what we believe and who we are as Indigenous peoples. And so, I'm interested in turning that narrative around, and I've been working hard on doing that for decades now. So I appreciate the invitation to talk about how we work towards improvement, how we're deliberate about what happens in the classroom and schools, and how that makes a difference in terms of the kinds of communities that we aspire to. I always often start with this picture here of myself and three of my siblings when we left Waterhen back in the 70s for the first time. We were living in a gravel pit out by Wanaskewin. And it just kind of grounds me to, kind of the fire in your belly that you grow, wanting to make a change and see things improve. I always, in my memory, I still have this acrid smell of burning steel and crushed rock. And I was pretty young in the picture there, but the years that we lived on at the gravel pit weren't a pleasant start. But I think that, what resilience teaches us is that we reach into those experiences and we make something of it, right? And I've kind of, given over my life to be able to try and make something of that. And, oftentimes we put on children what children shouldn't bear, right? And you see that in the news right now. If you watch what's going on in the Middle East and other places in the world, we give to children a burden that they don't deserve. We put that burden on them. And, that's something as educators, I think we all, obviously care about children, but we have to really interrogate systems as well and think about how in schools that we accept that mantle of responsibility and we do what we've been commissioned to do, and frankly, what we're paid to do, so that children don't bear the burden of what adults should or shouldn't be doing. I'm as I unfold a little bit of a narrative here, I'm also going to invite you with me to leave the land of nice, right? And that doesn't mean that we're not nice. It means, though, that there's a lot of things that we come to do in schools that we say, oh, are we ever good at that? We do this, we do that, we do that. But at the end of the day, what difference does it make, right? And I'm all for the long game. Like there's certain things that we do that we know will cumulatively have an effect. But there's certain urgency that when we look at outcomes on a population level, we're patient, right? But I invite you to think of, the child in your class or the child in your school that you most worry about, the one that you carry that little bit of a burden for and with, and the one that that if we don't intervene in the best way we can as adults, that the outcomes might not be ideal, right? And if you kind of imprint that child on your heart, that's what should lead us in what we do in education. And, is education a job? Sure it is. Is it a career? Yes. Is it a profession? Certainly. But it's a calling. And I think that we really need to remind ourselves of that. So leaving the land of nice doesn't mean I'll say not nice things, but I'm inviting you to, with me, interrogate sometimes what we do in schools. And I know when you go to conferences, you want to know, like, what can I use on Monday, right? What can I bring back to the classroom? Probably ideas and inspiration is what we're aiming for. There we go. There's this well, and I will say as well, as Patricia said, I'm a bit of an amateur photographer. Some of these pictures are mine, others not. I won't probably tell you which ones, but I have license for the ones that aren't mine. But there's this meme that my kids kind of bug me with, that they're going around that, baby boomers, or I might even be a start of Gen X. I'm not even sure when the years are that you're born or whatnot, but that we inherited everything like magically, that we didn't have to work for what we get, right? This meme is that, these baby boomers are selling their house for $1 million that they bought for a handful of raspberries back in the day, right? And I say, yeah, no, I get it, but certainly the complexity of society has changed, and it's not easy for young people trying to make a go of it. But I invite any of you ITEPers, as I was, and any other people that were inspired by the mission of becoming professional educators to think about how the narrative has changed and how our roles have changed, how our constructs have changed, how our schools have changed. It was tough slugging back in the day. I went through ITEP in the late 80s. Yes, I'm that old, and graduated in 90, I think, or 91. And it implanted in me that I think I already maybe had a little bit of I was a little bit of an instigator, and ITEP really brought that to a head and created that bit of a shit disturber, given it some meaning and purpose, right? In terms of not accepting what society gives to us in terms of our place and the glass ceilings. As a mixed blood First Nations person, I can move easily in and out of circles, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And my role has kind of been an instigator and, holding up the mirror to publicly funded education to show the shortcomings. So I've been a bit of an advocate, a bit of an instigator, a bit of a disruptor, but mostly a bit of an innovator. So there's nothing that I tell you that I haven't done or tried or worked with communities on improvements. And I see the great friend of mine and inspirational young man, Ian Worm, and we work together. And there he is in the green. And we got stuff done, right? I mean, we can talk about what should happen and what ought to happen, but what's really important is what will happen based on what we do, right? So we instigate. That's the way we get things done. It's part of our pedigree as Indigenous people. You can't be Indigenous in Canada and not be critical of the policy and social constructs that we operate within. I also invite, I've been doing a lot of reading and writing in this notion called like trickster logic, and like what is that? And it's really taking a step out on the limb a little bit, or on the ledge, and it's right kind of coming into a liminal space, a space that's less defined, a little more risky, but that's where stuff gets done. And so when it comes to learning improvement, that is, what we say we're going to do actually happens in schools. There's a lot of assumptions that we're asked to assume, or beliefs that we're asked to assume, knowledges that we're asked to assume. And, so we come on board a narrative that's already really well defined about what constitutes success, what constitutes leadership, what constitutes effectiveness. And I think that we need to really think differently about that. And so, like, kind of coming at it with a trickster logic says that, we can step out on the ledge, we can make mistakes, we can listen to the voices that kind of tell us what should be done and isn't happening, and we can instigate. And so those kinds of things are important. And how do we learn at conferences? We learn through stories. I mean, sometimes the content is good too, but we learn from meeting people in the hallway and telling them about what you're dealing with right now in your school, in your community, and listening to their stories and exchanging ideas. That's how we learn. And so that trickster logic kind of takes us away from the books and from the theories sometimes, and kind of gets us into a space where we learn from each other, and we trust our judgment and trust what's happening in our bellies, right? Trust what's happening where it doesn't feel right and we want things to change. And so, we get to kind of flit above the literal a bit. And I think that is a space that we can really exploit to think differently about schools and success. So, and I ask, like, what does Indian control of Indian education now we kind of extrapolate it. We say First Nations control of First Nations education or Indigenous control of Indigenous education. But what does it actually mean to you? Like, is it an affordance? Is it a commodity? Is it a calling? Like, what is it? And we think about it in different ways. Back in the late 90s, I think, or mid 90s or whatever, I had the opportunity to take a grad class from the late great Harold Cardinal, and he was lecturing in the summer at the University of Saskatchewan. I still remember we had a class in Thorvaldsen, that big kind of castle-y looking building, and it was an upper year Native Studies class, graduate class, and he was, it was just like listening to song when he talked, like just like listening to poetry, so intelligent and so insightful and so grounded. And I got to spend more time with him with a lot of students, because guess what? At the time I smoked, right? And Harold smoked. And so we'd go out at break, and it was in July, and we'd sit on the lawn outside of Thorvaldsen, and we'd smoke our cigarettes, and we'd talk about things, and I'd ask him all these questions and whatnot. And one day I was kind of like fanning out, and I brought my copy of The Unjust Society out with me, and I said, "Would you sign it?" And he laughed heartily. He laughed, just thinking, I mean, probably many people have asked him that over the course of his lifetime, but he said, "Why would you want that? Why would you want my signature? What value does that add?" And he asked me, like, "What does First Nations control mean to you? And what did you learn from this book?" And I told him, because I had this memorized, I said at the time, page 165, that's where the magic is. It's on page 165. And page 165, I won't read it all to you, but it says that we must assume new confidence. There must be a rebirth of the Indian, free, proud, his own man, and I apologize for the dated language of gender, the equal of his fellow Canadian. Some naively believe that true equality will come to the Indian by dispensation from some outside force. It is not within the power of any outside force, be it Prime Minister or any Minister of the Crown, to command equality. And you can read the rest of it. And I think that in Indian control of Indian education, we have to keep that in mind. No one can give that to us. It already exists. And our elders drew it out of the teachings. They drew it out of our patterns of our communities. They drew it out of our epistemology. So when they brought that into our consciousness, we adopt that as a calling, but it's not a political calling. It's a spiritual, cultural calling. It's part of who we are as First Nations and other Indigenous peoples, right? And so I think that, we have been victimized so much by broad constructs of society, policy, and law, that sometimes we look for resolution in society, constructs, policies, and law. And I would argue that it doesn't exist. It exists within all of us. We carry that with us, and that's where the healing comes from. So that's my interpretation of Indian control of Indian education from the late inspirational Dr. Harold Cardinal. There's also another side to the narrative, the other side of the same story. And actually, I only put this hamburger picture up because there's a philosopher and a writer and a great Canadian thinker, a Munial thinker in Canada, John Ralston Saul. Sir John Ralston Saul. We know he's important because they call him Sir, and we know he's important because he has 3 names. So I'm not sure what's up with that, but he's a pretty down-to-earth guy. And he's got among the many things he says, he's kind of countercultural. And he said that the Big Mac is and I apologize, I don't mean disrespect for any faiths here, but he said that the Big Mac is the communion wafer of consumerism, right? So it's like we bow down to the consumerist notion of McDonald's. But that's just one of the things he said. But the most important thing he said is he described what a fair country is. And he says that we're all Indigenous people. We all share in a shared history by virtue of being on this land. And he calls non-Indigenous Canadians to rise with Indigenous Canadians, to rise with us. Isn't that a great calling? And, I think as I look around and see what's happening with Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, especially in Saskatchewan with our strong Indigenous leadership, I think that Canada's finally rising with us a little bit, right? Because we need that balance. We need the other side of the narrative. We can pursue First Nations control vigorously, but we need that balance. We need all Canadians to come with us. So that's that notion of a fair country. There's also, what I was inspired when the duty to consult was articulated. And why is that? Because I used to, in my mind, have this vernacular thinking of when the colonizer comes to call, what do we say? So the duty to consult, that affordance where the government and agents of government are mandated to consult with Indigenous people where our treaty and inherent rights are in jeopardy or under discussion, right? That's a responsibility imputed on government and their agents. But what is the reciprocal responsibility imputed on us as Indigenous people? And I would argue that our responsibility is to gather our voices, know what we want to say, know what we want to accomplish, and articulate that well. So the call to a duty to consult is also a bit of a call for us to think about differently about talking about learning, talking about rights, and instigating that narrative within the context of our communities. That's the important part of asking and telling. They need to exist together. Not sure what this has to do with anything, but I was doing some work with the federal government a number of years ago, and we were at a meeting in Fredericton, and the talks weren't going well, so they took a recess, Fredericton, New Brunswick, I should say, and the talks weren't going well, so we took a bit of a recess. And during that recess, I went for a walk downtown, and there's this Beaver Brook Gallery there. And there's this guy named Lord Beaverbrook. And again, important because they called him Lord. I guess he's important. And he had a collection of really important paintings about early Canada and other global works of art, Western style art. And he donated it to a gallery. And so there's this Lord Beaverbrook's gallery in Fredericton. Actually, it's interesting. His family, after his death, they contested that he had given all this artwork to the gallery, and they tried to get it back, and they won a whole bunch of paintings back, and they sold them. But I guess that's what consumerism leads to, right? And so in this Beaverbrook Gallery, when you walk in, there's this I think about 3 by 4 meter painting by Salvador Dali. That's this guy here, a self-portrait of Salvador Dali. I didn't have the rights to put up the painting I wanted to talk about, but it's called Santiago el Grande. Great name, hey, Santiago el Grande. And so that's St. James. And St. James is, you can look it up on your phones, and St. James is on this white steed, and he's got this crucifix up in the sky, and he's rising out of the sea. It's actually really grand. I couldn't make sense of it. I've been in the big cathedrals in Europe and such, but this one is a little bit wild, right? And it's inspirational. It's right there in the lobby. It's a smaller gallery, and you walk in, and there's this huge painting, and it was really inspirational. So then I was really intrigued, and I went in and I was walking around the gallery, and there was quite a few pictures at the time of Indigenous peoples, early First Nations people in Canada's history. But there was something wrong as I walked around. I noticed that the faces were all a bit distorted, right? They didn't really look like human beings. They looked different. You wouldn't expect that they would be like a picture of what an actual human being would look like. And then I started looking at the early impressionists that were in the gallery of non-Indigenous people, and I noticed they also had a distorted kind of view to them. And that's because it was someone else's impression of who we were. Right. And so the notion of who we are is often represented in society through someone else's truths. Right. And as I walked through that gallery, I kind of got my ire up. I was ready to go back and fight with government, because I thought, that's what happens in education, too, is that we have someone else's impersonation of what we should be and who we should be and what we should do. And so it was kind of a turning point to the way I kind of thought about, our role and our representation in history. And then what's government up to right now? Like in Canada, government's got these policy constructs in education, federal government, that are looking at putting more money and renewed relationships into education. And I say, we'll take the money. We'll gladly take the money. And the relationships do need to be renewed. But these parts are what I was talking about earlier, will not change outcomes in our schools. more money and renewed relationships with Trudeau's government or any government will not change outcomes in our schools. End, stop, right? And so then, Gord, what's going to change outcomes in our schools? Reclaiming schools and system leadership. And that's why I put so much emphasis on school and system leadership, because we need to think differently about how we take back control. We're still, let's be clear, we're still living under the auspices of the Indian Act, racist legislation that brings First Nation schools into being. It causes them to be into being. And if you're standing or sitting or walking down the street alongside of a non-First Nations person, they don't have the same burden of that racist legislation, right? And it would be nice to think that it's really benign and it actually doesn't mean anything, but it does, right? It means something. It means that we have a federal steward of our education systems. Unless we're self-governing, we have a federal steward, right? Someone who is stewarding First Nations education. This isn't a slight on the good people, probably some good people. I don't mean to be, disrespectful about that work for ISC, but they can't run schools. They can't run our schools. In fact, they can't run any schools, right? That's not their forte. That's not what they do. And so we really need to interrogate the promises and probabilities here. What is government promising? And what is the probability that it's actually going to work? And I'm going to say that there could be any policy construct in the province or in the country short of self-governance, and it's not going to work for what we need. We need to do things ourselves, back to Dr. Harold Cardinal's words and inspirations. So, little sleight of hand, with 52 years of First Nations control of First Nations education, what is going on, right? 50% of students in Saskatchewan will graduate public schools. And let me clarify the link between First Nation schools and public schools. We use in our schools curriculum, and we have a lot of the structure that we inherit by virtue of there being a common curriculum. So unless you're self-governing, we are beholden to the common curriculum in Saskatchewan with our adaptations. But 50%, that's all we get. And I would argue, I've done a lot of research and work in my career around learning improvement constructs. Learning improvement constructs are defined or devised on a stratification mechanism or a stratification platform, meaning to improve, you have to have someone who's not improved, because you can't improve so much that your head pops off, right? At some point, we'd all be at the same place. And that's not how Western stratification works. And so there's an unwritten pact in Canadian education or North American education that First Nations and other Indigenous peoples need to be down at the bottom, because if they improve, then everybody improves, right? And then there's no more stratification. Therefore, improvement doesn't work anymore. Not sure that makes sense to you, but that's my belief about learning improvement. So the other thing is with the stratification of learning outcomes, and here's where I'm going to dip back to my notion of leaving the land of nice. We have to think about our own schools this way too. There's conceptually nothing that warrants maintaining a stratification of learning outcomes. Conceptually, it doesn't exist. It's not supported in literature or theory. In fact, research says that any learner of average cognitive ability, let's put that in parentheses, right, with the right interventions, the right diagnosis and interventions, can be brought to grade level in reading or other subjects. Any learner, any. Now, teaching's not easy, I get it, right? And there's a whole lot of pressures that you have to mediate at the classroom level, but we get lulled into complacency that learning improvement relies on this stratification, and that's not true. So there's nothing conceptually sound in learning improvement that keeps part of a population learning at a different level. And then let me go even further on that. There's absolutely nothing. And by the way, I should say, last year I spent months doing a lit review on classroom size and composition, or composition and complexity. So I kind of know what's going on in that world right now. There's nothing at all that would say that people of a certain race or culture occupy the bottom of the stratified learning continuum. There's nothing. It doesn't exist. It's a fallacy. So our oppression in education exists in structural aspects. That's kind of like the policy and program pieces. It exists in social pieces such as racism that's rampant in schools and society, as Tribal Chief Arcand illustrated this morning, and the technical aspects of schooling. And that's where we need to be obsessed with, those technical aspects of schooling, the unresponsive instruction and assessment. That's where the focus should be. So I invite you to adopt an improvement acuity. It's how we see improvement. And I was actually thinking about it because I took this picture on a cold September, October day last fall up by Watrous, I think. And I never use this picture because there's something that bugs the heck out of me with it. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a power line in it, right? And so I just can't stand it. And I was gonna in post-production, sometimes I can take it out, but it wasn't working very well. So I just left it alone. I don't use it. But I think that acuity of what we see and what we don't see, right? That's part of what we need to really adopt when we're thinking about our schools, so that we start to see about through a lens of improvement. I will say school success is still paramount. Like, and here's where this isn't a conflicting call to action here, because we say, well, first we have to heal our children. First, we have to ensure that they speak their languages, that they know their cultures. There's no superordinate. One is not better than the other. But the one thing you can say empirically, if you trust the numbers to any degree, is that if you complete school, you've got better life circumstance than if you don't complete school. Is there anyone who would argue that with me? Right? And who, the people that try to sell us a bill of goods that, it doesn't really matter because it's okay if Indigenous children graduate in 4, 5, or 6 years because at least they get there. You know what? I tend to agree with that. But the people that tell us that are the ones that whose children are all graduating on time, 3 years, right? And they would accept nothing less. So on-time graduation is really important. And so that's the acuity that we need to start thinking about. The greatest challenge is that there's a myth that schools don't work for us, therefore we need to do things in a different way, or that we don't work for schools. And both of those are very dangerous myths, because schools are a space that we're not abandoning anytime soon. They can look different, they can present differently, but schools aren't going away. So we need to be able to claim that space and make them work for our children and your youth. Interestingly, success is not impeded, not held back by First Nations control. But hear this, it's not always enhanced by it, right? First Nations control is not enough on its own to say that our children are going to start doing better, that the day we got control, our children started doing better in schools. That will happen over time, but it only happens as a result of other good things that we do as leaders and teachers. See, the difference is in 1972, when our chiefs and our leaders and our elders called for First Nations Indian control of Indian education in 1972, we had virtually no teachers, right? There was virtually no Indigenous teachers, and now we populate the field, right? We are the majority in our First Nations communities. So why haven't things drastically changed? Because it's not only occupying the space that's important, it's what actually happens in that space. And those of you who know me well know that I'm obsessed with, well, a lot of things, but attendance, wellness, and learning outcomes. Those are things that I'm like obsessed about in any good school. And, people hate when I use that language of good school because they say, well, Gord, my graduate students will say, if you say good school, you're implying that some schools aren't good. And I'll say, some schools need to get better at a quicker rate than others. I was doing a school improvement process with 2 First Nations schools in Northern Ontario about 15 years ago, way remote. And they were actually close geographically, but there was no road because they were fly-in communities. So they were close geographically, but they were very separate. But get this, the people were from the same families. They spoke the same language. They had the same traditions. They had the same ceremonies. They had the same cultures. They had the same families. They shared kinship. But you know what was going on? Oh, and the other important thing to keep in mind is one school was about 160 students up to grade 9, I think. The other was about 153 students. They were just about identical. They had the same proportion of Indigenous teachers. They used the same curriculum. They had the same types of schools built in the same era. One school, the students read at grade level by about mid-grade 4, right? So they were achieving grade level outcomes by about mid-grade 4. The gold standard is like grade 3, and then, you know, students are like home free. The other school next door, they were achieving reading grade level by about grade 8. So meaning the vast majority of their students didn't read at grade level. And their transitions to post-secondary were ridiculous. In one community where their reading rates were high, they were transitioning students to post-secondary, even as a fly-in community, at a rate of about 50% back 15 years ago, and the other one had about 2%, right? And now you know the punchline. You know where I'm going with this. What was the only difference? It was the leader, right? And the leader, one knew instruction and assessment and led from that paradigm, and another was a leader by the sign. You knew he was a leader because he had a sign on the door, right? So leadership is critical, and it's really important to that acuity of what causes success to happen in schools. A few years ago, I read this book called Us Conductors. It's a little obscure. It's kind of weird, but it was about this I guess this magic of this instrument called the theremin. And a theramist is someone who plays a theremin, and that's a picture of it. And it was invented in 1928 by a Russian physicist named Leon Theremin. And it's a really weird thing. You don't touch it. There's no strings on it. There's 2 antennae on it, or antennae, or whatever you say the plural is. And one controls frequency and one controls volume. And all you do is you move your hands about, and it's just like watching magic happen, right? And music comes out of this crazy instrument, and you can watch it on YouTube later. And if you need to go to sleep, you'll listen to the theremin, and it'll put you to sleep. But what it reminds me of is kind of the sorcery of the learning bar, or the learning gradient, the socioeconomic gradient. In Canada, or really around the world in all OECD countries, there's a socioeconomic gradient that is developed based on PISA results. So what it says, there's a learning bar, and they plot all schools in Canada on it. And this bar, if it's low, it means it's a bar on a graph, I should say. And if the bar is low, it means the learning outcomes are low. If the bar is high, the learning outcomes are high. If the bar is tilted, it means that there's poor and rich. If the bar is flat, it means people are generally about the same income level. So it's a little bit like soothsaying, you know, it's a little bit of this magic. And what happens is that our goal is to raise so that our students have a better learning outcome, and level the bar, right? So that they're less dealing with the effects of poverty. So raising and leveling the bar. And the instigator of this model, this magical model, is a friend of mine named Dr. Doug Wilms. He's from New Brunswick. And he does this kind of work all over the world. And he was at a conference, actually, I think in this very room a few years ago. And someone said, Dr. Wilms, if you were going to change the trajectory of learning outcomes for Indigenous youth in Saskatchewan, what would you do? What would your advice be? And this guy knows literacy and learning paradigms like the back of his hand. And what he said, he thought about it long and hard, and then he said, I would make sure that every child and youth has a club or an activity that they can go to where they can develop special skills and nurture talents that are meaningful to them, right? And the person that asked the question, he was a director in the province at the time, and he said, I'm shortening the story, but he said, thank you, Dr. Wilms, but I don't think you understood my question. I'm going to ask it again. I'm going to ask, if we wanted to raise the bar and raise the learning outcomes of all students in Saskatchewan, what would we do? And do you know what Doug said? I'm sticking with my answer, right? I'm sticking with my answer. It's about every student having something meaningful that they can attach to, so that we can raise and level the bar, because the magic of this socioeconomic gradient, as described by Dr. Wilms, is that equity and excellence need to work together. There needs to be a symbiosis between equity and excellence. So it's not enough just to aim for equity. We have to also aim for excellence. They travel together. They can't be separated. If we're going to have our First Nations schools higher on the bar and flattened, right? So we need to be thinking about how we raise and level the bar. I was watching this documentary in a theater in Toronto. I was there for a film festival kind of thing that was going on for equity and for EDI. I chair some EDI work for some national organizations. And there was this clip in it that really inspired me and kind of made me a little bit sad, but also, I don't know, it was kind of an odd sense of feeling. There was this tower and there was these Tibetan monks in it, and they make these sand mandalas. So they use these little funnels and they drop colored sand, and that's actually made of sand. And if you look it up online, these sand mandalas are like crazy intricate, right? They're like really, really intricate artwork. And they create them and they put prayer into them. There's intentionality. So they're praying into these mandalas, right? And then what happens in this video is they stand back and they look at this inspirational, beautiful work of art. And it was in a tower. And each of the cardinal directions, there was windows with shutters on them. And what did they do then? They threw open the shutters, and it was a really windy day, and the wind came in and it blew the whole mandala away. It was gone instantly. And there was all this sand, colored sand in the air, and these people were dancing around. It was kind of a really inspirational, moment. And I think what it reminds me of is that we've got that same beauty when we assemble it. We have to think about how we bring that together. I'm a big proponent of learning networks and collaboration. That teaching can be an isolating profession. Leadership can be an isolating profession. But I will tell you this, and the literature would bear this out. Leadership and learning will almost always fail if you do it alone. It'll almost always fail, right? And so what you need to do is learn to teach with your classroom door open, go next door and talk to your colleagues and figure out how to improve your professional craft or your profession with other colleagues. We can't do it alone. So we're socialized into the profession in certain ways. And I think we need to revision that and re-socialize into the profession in a manner that advantages a relational trust and takes away learning and knowledge as an individual commodity, but offers it forward as a relational responsibility. So that knowledge doesn't belong to, and that's what our elders tell us, right? It's not about the knowledge that belongs to you or I. It's how we collectively share that knowledge and we all uphold it. And that's so important in our schools where we all have to be part of that collective to uphold that knowledge. Oops. In a lot of my belief in what causes schools to be effective comes from the late Richard Elmore from Harvard and other Elizabeth City and David Hopkins and others that were trained at Harvard, because I used to bring my principal leaders to Harvard and we were trained in instructional rounds. When you go to Harvard, it's kind of a weird place. It's like, first of all, it's amazing that all the buildings are brick, right? So it's like this mammoth campus of all these brick buildings. And there's this statue of this John Harvard. It was kind of intriguing because people, you can look it up, people go and they rub his boot. It's supposed to be good luck. I didn't do that because I think it's not my tradition, but you can see how the bronze statue there, his boot is all shiny. So people rub the boot and it's supposed to bring him good luck. But it was only in the first lecture when I was at Harvard that I realized what that was all about. Like, John Harvard was an English minister, and he came over from England, settled in Massachusetts in the colonies, and he accomplished all these things. And apparently, he caused Harvard to be. He willed this into being. He said there needed to be a knowledge institute in the new territories and such, and he brought it into being. But interestingly, he died of the plague at 30 years old. Right? That's pretty young, So that kind of intrigued me, but. I remember also when I was in Harvard the second time, I think, doing instructional rounds training, we went to a school out in a town called a city called Charlesburg, about, I don't know, an hour and some away from Cambridge. And the school had 1,800 mostly Haitian Creole children in it. And in the States, they measure poverty, I guess, by whether you qualify for the free lunch program, and 95% of the students qualified for the free lunch program. So there was a very low socioeconomic school, but the leader was a young Haitian Creole woman herself, and they were at the time they were on the No Child Left Behind list. So they were either going to turn the school around or shut it down, right? And this young woman, she was about 37. she came into the school and she did a school turnaround. She actually caused them to come back up to grade level. And she did that through instigating collaboration within her school. But networks have there's some work that the Gates Foundation did in a few years back anyway, that demonstrated that learning networks, either of leaders or teachers, are based on a few simple things: socialization into a group so that there's collective trust, right? Distributed leadership so that it's hard to pick out who the leader is. Working from a relevant problem of practice, so you actually know what the issue is that you're trying to resolve, and then data informed experimentation, that you can attempt to intervene with mechanisms that'll improve learning. And there's a school on UBC campus and traditional Musqueam territory, Norma Rose Point. In fact, the Waterhen elders and some of the leaders and educators went there a couple of years ago now, I guess, to learn some of the attributes of their strategy. And it's those very accessible strategies of collaboration that are spell some of the promise that we need to think about and draw down into our schools. So I was in Vancouver not long ago, and I took this picture just with my phone. And what I was looking at it after, because I thought the colors were so vibrant. And if you look closely at it, I think there's a pattern to it. I do. I think there's a pattern, right? And then if you think about it in terms of like statistics, like why would there be a pattern? Probably because there was forces that put things into place, like the wind and the rain. And so the leaves fell in a certain way, right? And so you could say that it's random, but it's also patterned. And so I'm a proponent of leadership as patterned practice. Right. So when we're leading, whether it's in our classroom or leading schools, we tend to think about leaders as having this charisma, right? So that leadership is either positional, it's because of the name that's on your door, or is charismatic, oh, he's a born leader. She's a born leader. Have you ever heard that? I don't think there's such a thing as born leaders. I think leadership is engineered through socialization, through trial and error, and in the context of community. And so that's how leadership is developed or defined. So I come from a school of thought of believing that leadership is actually a practice of improvement. It's not carrying out a policy construct, it's a practice of improvement. And in the absence of leadership, there's an absence of improvement. You have to have leadership to improve. And again, Leithwood says that someone that you may know of some of his work in network leadership. Leithwood says there's not a single example of a successful school that he's ever witnessed without an effective leader. Not a single example of effective school without an effective leader, right? That's an impossibility. You can't have one without the other. You can't succeed in spite of the leadership. So I think it's really important that we keep that in mind and we work to ultimately restore leadership. So again, thinking about those two schools in Ontario and why they were so different when they were so homogenous, right? And so leadership is a humanizing practice, right? It's a human endeavor, but it's also a humanizing practice that you humanize the context of education as you connect people. So a leader should be almost invisible and should work as a connector to draw people together, to draw out their gifts. I truly believe that in any configuration of learning, any one of your schools, if the staff all come into the staff room, that includes your EAs, your elders, your office people, your caretaking staff, your teachers, and your leaders. And if you close the door, the knowledge that you need to turn your school around actually is already in the room. It's already there. And I hate to say this at a conference, but there's little that we can glean from a conference. They're good to instigate our thinking, but the knowledge that we actually need to turn around a school is already in the school. And then a leader's job is to draw it out and to create it into a practice. That's how we need to restore leadership. Social change is something that we often put on the shoulders of leaders, right? Especially in First Nations education. We need leaders to liberate and do all sorts of fancy things like that. But social change only ever happens in the classroom. It happens with children and youth that are inspired. When I was superintendent with the Catholic School Board here in Saskatoon, again, this is coming out of the land of nice, but I'm not speaking ill of any particular people. But when I took on that school as a superintendent, the credit completion rate was 18%. 100% First Nation students. Most of them had, some were urban, others were, closely connected with their First Nations communities, but they only delivered 18% credit delivery. 18%. Atrocious, right? And so what do? We changed leaders, and now I'll use a name. Inspirational leader by the name of Craig Schellenberg came in from Stobart. He was at Stobart and Duck Lake. Some of you may know Craig. He's a pretty inspirational guy. He lives in Victoria now. And his quiet confidence. Here's an example. I'd go into school and I'd say, because I'm sometimes I can be a little bossy and demanding, and I'd go in and I'd say to the secretary, "Where's Craig? He's not in his office. I need Craig." And she'd go, "He's in classrooms. And he told me, if you come here, you're just going to have to wait." Right? Because where was he putting the primacy? In the classroom. I'll tell you something. In the first 2 years, Mr. Humble Craig Schellenberg spent every single day in classrooms. And you know what he was doing? He'd have his glasses at the end of nose. He'd have his notebook open. He'd be sitting there co-constructing lessons and instigating inspirational innovations with teachers in the school. That's what he did as a leader. He was in the classroom. Let's not talk about his ability to get financial reports done because, right, that didn't really matter. When I was a superintendent, in my network of principals, I'd have anywhere between about 12 and 14 schools, all the West Sector community schools in Saskatoon, the Catholic community schools. And in 1 year, we purged the focus on administrivia in our network meetings. So we stopped talking business. So our principals, they kind of whined about it for about 6 months or so. They said, we can't come to a principals meeting and not talk about budgets and policies and facilities and this and that. And I said, I think we can actually get away with never talking about that because I tend to be a little extreme. I push a little bit, right? And what happened in about 6 months kind of blew me away because I thought they'd just talk less about administrative stuff. You know what they actually did? They stopped talking about administrative stuff. They wouldn't talk about it anymore. They only talked about learning. And I'm proud to say with the schools that I worked with, you know what those schools could do? They could deliver the pinnacle of success. The Catholic community schools could deliver 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. That's our promise, right? That's our commitment to families and children. Pretty incredible. But back to Oskayak, Craig comes in, doesn't work any magic. He spends every day in classrooms. And you know what the credit delivery rate was in 2 years from 18%? It was 81%, right? They went from 3 graduates the year before he arrived to 30 graduates the first year he was there, then 40, then 50, then 60, then 70. And now the school is in around that upper, 50s to 70s, in around that area, right? That's a leader who turned that around. And the successive leaders, including the current leadership, do exactly that. I was doing a lit review for an organization. I guess I still am. And so I've had the opportunity to immerse myself in learning leadership or leadership literature, Indigenous leadership literature for about the past, year or so. And there's some really interesting patterns that emerged. You can kind of take the playbook of how you defined Indigenous leadership, you can rip it up and throw it away because there's a whole bunch of recent literature that redefines what Indigenous leadership is. And Heather knows this work well. And so here's the attributes. Restorative leadership, right? It restores, it liberates, restores, and reclaims. So leaders do that not as a proxy for something else or not just saying it in name, but effective Indigenous leaders actually restore values, traditions, and customs. That's part of their contribution to school communities. Interestingly as well, the literature yields a strong representation of collaborative leadership. So leaders becoming whole in community. But get this, it's defined differently than Western collaborative leadership. Western collaborative leadership are more leadership constructs that are drawn from leadership and applied to a community. In Indigenous leadership literature, there's the inverse, that the collaborative leadership comes out of a bond and a responsibility to each other. So the collaboration is in development, in practice, in effectiveness. So it's grounded in the practice of leadership. also the literature is strong in terms of relational accountability. So the accountability to community, again, what's our pact with community? What are we called to practice on the part of community? How are we accountable to our community? That's also what's strongly represented in the literature. But mostly what's interesting is there's a whole new body of literature emerging of Indigenous leaders that are changing learning outcomes by virtue of their learning leadership. So rethinking and reinventing how they use data, how they organize their learning communities for effectiveness, their capacity to innovate, and how they overcome deficit thinking. Those are some of the things that leaders do. So there's a whole different paradigm. And I would argue that because you're, I always say Patricia and her team, I kind of lovingly call them learning geeks a little bit, right? Like they know assessment and instruction. And that's really important because there's not a lot of tribal authorities. And Heather did that. Ken did that before, right? They know assessment and instruction. That's why I think, a little selfishly, that MLTC is riding a bit of a wave of effectiveness because you've had leadership, you've had strong tribal leadership, strong band leadership, but guess what? Leadership that actually understands teaching and learning. That's not the norm everywhere, right? And that's because of that there's a hotbed of an environment where I think you folks should be doing a lot of research and mapping the kinds of practice that you have to restory leadership within the context of Meadow Lake Tribal Council. I'm not here to talk about my amateur photography, but I was outside this winter and I was cold, so I was putting gloves on and I put my camera on a picnic table in a park, and I pressed the shutter and unknowingly, and this is the picture it took. It was a leaf that was in the snow there, and I thought it was kind of cool, so I kept it. But restoring leadership is about relationship, modeling, incremental growth. But I think leadership always needs to be deliberate, right? It's not by happenstance. We need to, this quote here talks about abandoning the typical classroom. That's not only in its physical construct, there's so much that's inherent in a classroom today, right? When I'm in First Nation schools, I see a lot of teachers doing things in spite of the constructs that you think you need to do. You think you need to sit in desks. You think you need to organize a certain way. You think you need to organize a certain way. You think you need to teach a certain way. And I invite you to think about restoring learning where you can liberate yourself from the traditional classroom. There's this other Harvard-ism that I want to share with you because I think it's appropriate here. For every unit of improvement that you expect of a teacher, you owe them a unit of support. That's the reciprocity. Think about that. For every unit of improvement, you deserve a unit of support. And so you can't magically improve your practice because remember, I think practice is a matter. It's not the fault of the families. It's not the fault of the building. It's not the fault of the environment. It's not the fault of government. It might be all of those things, but it's your responsibility. And all things being equal, you can actually improve learning outcomes with patterned practices, right? And so restoring leadership is it's invigorating that pact with your leadership that they need to support you to be able to improve, that it's a reciprocal relationship. When I was a superintendent, we decided that we would put treaty medals in all of our schools. And so we bought a bunch of these big medals, and over the pandemic interrupted it. I'm not there anymore, so I don't know if they finished, but in all our 52 schools or whatever, we installed treaty medals. And the first one ever in the Catholic board was a little school out in the River Heights area called St. Paul. And it's a French immersion school. And the principal at the time, who's now principal at Oskayak, he's an amazing individual by the name of Ted View. And he's all in for treaty education, all in. He's an amazing guy. And he invited STC as the local tribal authority to participate. And Chief Watson from Mistawasis came and he brought his great-grandfather's treaty medal. That's it. It's amazing. And that's my white little hand there holding it. And I was holding that, my fat little hand holding that treaty medal. And it was like, think about the energy, the power in that, right? It was just amazing to think about, what that medal had witnessed, I suppose. Just a little aside, before I left the Catholic School Board, we were designing the new St. Francis Cree Bilingual School, which, by the way, is already and will continue to be the largest Indigenous language school in the world, right? In the world. Isn't that cool? it'll open full when it opens in the fall of 25 with about 800 students. And in the center, and I encourage the Waterhen elders to really think about these attributes. In the center, there's going to be inside the school a real live 18-foot teepee, not a mock teepee, but a real teepee. The poles will be stored by the stage, and there's a ceremonial area, and on it there's going to be like lights embedded in the ceiling that are stars, and it's the constellation on August, I forget the date. Pardon me, I forget the date, but on August, whatever, 1876 at Fort Pitt. So when students lie on the floor there and look up in the ceremonial area, they'll see the same sky that those who signed treaty at Fort Pitt saw. Isn't that cool? That's how we start to think about our spaces differently and decolonize our learning spaces. So, but this treaty medal really reminded me of our commitment to parents, our commitment to parental engagement. And what the literature bears out is some truths here that I want to wrap up with, because I know we're getting close to the end of my time and you're probably tired of listening to me. And I apologize especially to those students who I've had in graduate programs who had to listen to me for hours talk. I got to teach in 3 Indigenous leadership cohorts. The first one in 2016 that Patricia was a part of and a superstar in that cohort, the first U of S Indigenous leadership cohort. The second one, the amazing people at Onion Lake invited us out to their territory, and a whole bunch of master students there, some of which I see. And the third cohort now that's in nearing the end of their program, they're going to finish in December. That'll be a total of 75 Indigenous, mostly First Nations leaders that have come through the master's program. So that's how we're repopulating our schools. But anyway, there's some research that I've been doing again for the classroom composition and complexity. And here's some truths that I want to share with you. So this is kind of the punchline. Everything else maybe was just filler. Now let's get to some truths. When people say they speak truths, I want to speak some truths, but they're actually, now you can take them and put them into action. Parental engagement. You cannot succeed without deliberate parental engagement, and you need to re-envision family and student supports as a single unit. So when you treat students for this anomaly or that, wellness or other things, and then you treat the family separately, the global literature would say it's not as effective as when you bring that together and you renew your pact with parents and community, and you support families. So especially young moms, like the Martin Family Initiative, for example, is doing work with young moms to help support them. You can't expect to take their children out of the home, put them in the school at 3 and 4 years old, and expect that the context is going to change. What's happening with that mother, right? And I know a lot of your communities are actually working with families, but you need to develop that continuum. That's not an easy thing to do, to implement in your classroom on Monday morning, but it's a truth that exists in literature and supported in practice. So you can think about that differently. In grade 8, I was in a Catholic school in Saskatoon here, St. Francis, and my grade 8 teacher was the vice principal, and he came back from a conference with this innovation, and he told the students this. He said, I'm going to line you up from dumbest to smartest so I can spend more time with the dumb kids, right? So that I can better support you for success, or however he said that, right? Grade 8, he told his grade 8 students that. And there was 5 First Nations kids in the class, 5 of us. I was one of them. I won't use their names. There was 4 others. There was 5 rows of 5, and all 5 of us were in the dumb row. All 5 of us, right? So that it kind of characterizes how schools thought about Indigenous learners at the time, whether we were visible or not, right? Lined us up from dumbest to smartest. Use that language. I'm not sure what measure they use, but I've never tried to answer back to that, but I don't think I was assessed properly there. In grade 9, I'd never read a book before, like not really read a book, right? Like really read a book. Like to say I took a book and read it, I could read, but I never read a book, right? Never. And in grade 9, I had this amazing teacher who said, I want you to do a book report. And I had probably I wasn't that much of a dedicated student in high school. And I balked at that. And I said, I don't read, I'm not going to do it. And he said, I want you to do a book report. And I said, I don't read. And he says, Go to the library, find a book, and I'll help you do a book report. So I was going to outsmart the system. So I went to the library and I found the shortest book I could, Cloud Cuckoo Land. It's 52 pages. What I don't want to tell you is that I stole the book and I still have it in my office, right? That's an actual picture. I have the book. Why did I choose that book? Because it's 52 pages. But I think there was something providential about it, because look at the quote that comes from the book. It's a story about all brave people who believe the unbelievable and spend themselves in the pursuit of the impossible. And if you know what cuckoo birds do in terms of occupying other nests, you'll kind of get a sense of how that plays out, right? And so I actually read that book, and I had a sweeping sense of accomplishment, and I wrote a book report and I got an A, right? It wasn't really a turnaround for me, but it was actually the first time I actually convinced myself I could learn. The second book in life that I ever read was called Papillon. It's about a French prisoner escaping from a Guyanese jail, penal colony. And I've read it now about a dozen times, and it's one of my favorite books. I'm not sure why. The third book I read in my life was The Collected Works of Lord Byron. And so there's a trajectory there, a very short trajectory, but I think it speaks to the truths about students that, we have to think about each student in terms of their latent potential. If there's anything you take away from this, you say, what did Gord talk about? He kind of rambled about this and that. I'm not quite sure what his message was, but I'm going to invite you to be obsessed with attendance, to be obsessed with it, because the literature is clear. If students, they need to come to school and stay in school to be successful. And there's actually no other way you can be successful without that. They need to come to school and stay in school to be successful. It's the only way. The other truth that emerges in the literature is that when students' outcomes improve, the whole class improves. But get this, there's also a reciprocal that's true. When the whole class improves, the student outcomes improve. And so the level comes up together, because remember that bar, raising and leveling the bar, that there's a peer effect. It's called the peer effect of learning, right? And it's no big surprise that you learn by the smarts of those people around you. So you exchange that with them. But with attendance, at a population level, right? And so we all have anomalies. We can say, well, that is not true for me or kids in my school. But at a population level, for every 10% you miss on average over the course of your entire school career, you're missing about a grade level, right? So this is rhetorical. You don't need to know. But when you go back, talk about it as a staff. On average, how many days do our children attend school? And there's lots of reasons why they don't attend. One I won't talk about, but you know why we close our schools often. Another is weather. Another is just some kids that don't come to school. If your students are attending school about 140 days a year, and they do that from kindergarten to grade 12, you know that their grade 12 is going to be worth about a grade 8 or grade 9. Right? We know that empirically at a population level. So we need to be obsessed about school attendance. That's not to put the blame on communities. It's a difficult task to have students attend regularly and stay in school. It's about environment. But if I was king of the world, I would say the one thing we need to do in First Nations education to make us more successful and deliver that promise to our students is that we need to make sure they're in school every day. And just by virtue of being in school, because you believe then that what you're delivering is good. If they can stay at home and still succeed, then what about our practice, right? So you are bringing your best professionalism to school every day. And so what we need is students to actually encounter that. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to hustle up here. The truths about teaching. Teachers need to be in collaborative networks. They need to be in inquiry networks. They need to plan together and learn together. At Norma Rose Point in Vancouver, every day the teachers come together at the end of the day for a mandatory planning where they sit with the data wall. They plan forward to the next day, week, month, and the rest of the school year, right? And so you need to be obsessed with collaboration. Don't go it alone, because it doesn't predict performance, doesn't predict outcomes. Lastly, or just about lastly, task predicts performance. Task predicts performance. When you're in classrooms, look down, don't look up. Teachers will say I'll say, what outcome are you aiming for today? And they'll say, well, I want the students to be able to differentiate between cause and effect and blah, blah, blah. They'll talk about, and then I'll say, oh, what are they doing? They're doing a word search. Actually, you know what? If you've got word searches here, I said I was going to go into the land of nice, go out away from the land of nice gently. If you've got word searches in your classroom, when you get them back, turn them over and use them as coloring paper or shred them for the gerbil cage, right? Because they actually add no value whatsoever. No value whatsoever. Never have, never will. There's no learning in a word search at all, ever. So I know I'm being a little extreme with that, but task predicts performance. I was at 2 culture camps a couple of years ago, weeks apart. So I always look down at what students are doing. One culture camp, I won't say where they are, was the students were sitting in learning circles with elders. They were formulating questions of inquiry. They were traveling to the various stations and learning. They were documenting their learning with a variety of ways, including photography and interviewing elders. That was one. And so when you looked at what the students were doing, they were listening, they were talking, they were writing, they were documenting, a whole bunch of things. The other culture camp at a community, of course, I won't talk about. Here's what the students were doing. They were sitting in the parking lot on the curbs on their phones. There was lovely cultural activities happening, and the students were in the parking lots on their phones, just about all of them, just about all of them. So that it wasn't the same. Task predicts performance, right? And so as educators, we need to control for the task. So second last slide. Story. I was walking down the street in Toronto last summer, and I saw this guy walking past this sign. This is paradise. So I snapped a quick picture of him. What I encourage you to do is map patterns of effectiveness. Look for them in your school. Identify their origins. Trace the pathways. Remember them and replicate them. Because teaching is only about one thing or two things that travel together. It's about predicting and measuring. I think this is going to work. I'm going to try it. Then I'm going to measure the outcomes, and I'm going to course correct. I think this is going to work. I'm going to try it. I'm going to measure the outcomes. That's the only equation that matters. So you're really scientists, right? And you're creators, and you're, in a way, ceremonialists when you're teaching. But teaching doesn't happen any other way. You have to teach by predicting and measuring. We need to map the pattern of what First Nations education is really all about. You know, I put this picture of my grandparents there, the late Bruno and Judille Martel from Waterhen. They were lovely old people, and you know, my grandmother never spoke English. She was a Moran from Green Lake. My grandfather was chief at Waterhen, and you know, other attributes. But they were part of a generation, I think, that understood exactly what we're talking about today, because they were the old people that kind of gave birth to what Indian control is all about. It's about being deliberate. It's about not leaving to happenstance what learning is all about, taking back control of it. But my argument is simple. Taking back control of it is not only in name, it's in practice. And how do we do it in practice? We do it in community, right? We can all achieve the gold standard of 1 year's growth in 1 year's time. We need support. And let's not guilt out each other if we don't do that. But let's support each other to revise the practice and start writing the textbooks so that the improvement literature is born of your school, right? It's born of your community, and that we map a curriculum, we map a pedagogy, we map an epistemology out of Meadow Lake Nations, First Nations. Wouldn't that be ideal? So you own learning improvement. You've got the responsibility, you've got the skills. Come out of your classrooms, go next door, talk to your peers, create a collective practice, and you're the promise of First Nations, control of First Nations education. I thank you for everything you do. Thanks for listening. A little bit of a winding road. Exe, that's all I have today. Hi, and Anaskaman. I'm thankful to be here, and all the best in the rest of your conference.
Yes.
On behalf of Meadow Lake First Nations education team, we have a little bit of a gift for you of how much we love you.
Yes.
So I was so nervous to introduce you. I told everybody that you were from Wichikin. He's from Waterhen. I'm like, oh my gosh. So anyway, Lisa told me right away, so we know she's got your back. Right. So I do want to, and also I got corrected about one thing. Those those little toppers that has one QR code on one side and one QR code on the other side is actually the feedback form. Okay. So this would be the time that you would get out your phone. You would go to the picture where you take pictures and you would hover over that QR code. And then you would do a quick feedback form for the time spent with Dr. Gordon Martell. Then it's going to be, then you'll have access to the free draws for the door prizes that are given out on Friday. There will be little, about 25 in each room because there's 4 rooms. There's a gallery A and B. There's gallery C and D. And there is a that's on the floor that is below us. In the basement is the Centennial A and the Centennial B. So please make sure that you look over which sessions that you would like to attend. Right now, I can see the nutrition break is out. We have a half an hour and we will commence back for our only sessions of the day at 2:45, and then we'll come back here and we'll have a round dance. I think that's everything. Thank you. Egse, ¿cómo estás?